a lot of backing behind it. And then when it got out into the branches, it fizzled out, and now it's just a skills program. It really is not a true mentorship program. So
Yeah.
it had a tremendous potential, and I
Yeah.
think there's something in that mix where coaches feel perhaps a bit intimidated by that relationship, like they're being evaluated or something, and that's
Yeah.
contrary to the mentorship model, of course.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I found too with the Royals. I mentored probably about between 4 and 6 a year for 4 years, I think, and it was the same thing. It felt to me like they thought we were there evaluating them and reporting back to the association on what they were doing or what they weren't doing. And I felt that they felt very uncomfortable, and so I tried to find ways to try to put that at ease. But I didn't honestly have much success with getting the coaches to buy into it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how we got started on the topic, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's another good topic. But uh, I think this is my take anyway. You're exactly right, Malcolm. I made them feel uncomfortable because they shared so much stuff. And the reality was, you are evaluating. If they're harmful, you have to address it. And it's sort of that you're walking a fine line. And as a result, in Cochrane, we used to have some really good gigs. Like we were paid, you know, the amount we should have been paid to go out per hour, practice times and ice times. And we had to communicate before and after the session. And the follow up that was to occur was sort of relied on the trust and communication you had with the group of mentors. So I'm not sure there's a better way of doing it, but Tim, have you've been assigned to coaches with in Cochrane, and what do you think of making it more sustaining? What do you have to do?
Well, I mean, um, I would echo the sentiments that generally, a people don't want to be told what to do. B, if you're there to help them, it's a really difficult thing to sort of walk that line. And um, I guess what I probably want to say is, if you can get into the mode that we all talk about asking a lot of questions about what they're doing or why they're doing it, that's probably the best avenue. But I don't know that I'm not even sure there's a way to sort of morph basically sort of young coaches from that early coaching phase where they have a sense that, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I have a plan, and I don't want to, like, just they're not interested really in learning more so much as they're just so focused on winning and their team doing well. Anyway, I'm not really saying anything, but it's a difficult thing, and I totally get it. I mean, I would have been there as a coach for a lot of my coaching career, where unless I decided that I wanted somebody like Bob or Wally or Malcolm or
No.
somebody to help me, mentor me, unless I decide that, it's a tough thing. And
Yeah.
Bingo.
I think.
Bingo, right there, Tim.
I think the
Yeah.
associations would be really better off to like hire Bob and say to all the coaches, look, Bob's on staff with us to help you guys. If you would like to talk to Bob, here's his number, here's his email, and start it that way, that where there's no obligation whatsoever. It's purely a resource, and then you might get some traction. Obviously, that's probably the best way to try to get it off the ground. I think maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Bob and Tim, because they talk about in mentorship relationships that it truly has to be a two-way street, and the learner or the mentee has to be in the space where they want to be guided. And if they're not, that's the end of the relationship. So I think a lot of times, because we set up these mentorship programs, we assume that we have to make them work. But I think the mentor at the very beginning has got to be willing to say, you know what, coach learner, you're not ready. Or the coach learner has got to be able to say, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I understand what you guys are saying, but here the problem, and Morris, I'm just gonna ask your opinion. You mentor different teams, and I don't know if you've been listening to what we've said or not, but how did you find the mentorship you were tasked to do in Cochrane? Because basically they haven't contracted us to do that again. So it might have lasted 3 years, and I felt going out and sharing stuff with them, but the problem is they don't know what they don't know, and that's human. It's not a criticism. And so, Morris, what did you find with the acceptance of the coaches and how well your mentorship worked, how effective it was?
From the very start of the program, I found that they were a little bit like Medicine Hat, a little bit suspect. And then when they realized that we weren't there to embarrass them, but really to help them, then the trust grew quickly. And so that maybe could be one thing pointed out right from the start. That was a barrier, so I had to work through that. And then I felt the coaches were very, very receptive to various things, and especially in practices. And the thing is, I mean, I introduced things to them I think that they never thought about. Like I would help them improve their practices, improve the puck touches. But then when it came to their talk in the dressing room, for them to realize that some of their talk may have actually been sabotaging their message, I think they really didn't like that idea to start with. And then it takes them a while to actually open up to the possibility that new languaging could have been required. And then just even on the bench, some of the things that I would point out, they would say, wow, never really even thought of that. Like how the guys that are opening up the gates could be sabotaging their message. So it ended up being very receptive. And it was really cool, actually. I will say one thing, the higher it went up, and the younger the coaches got, the bigger the resistance was. Younger coaches were pretty, they didn't really want to learn very much. Really, everybody else was pretty open to it.
Do you think it's a coaching maturity thing, Morris?
It may have been. I mean, the young guys, they'd come out of the Cochrane Generals, and they were pretty clear that they knew just about everything around hockey. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. And so to watch the same mistakes being made over and over, and without any change to it, I did ask myself, what am I doing here? And I think they actually asked, what are you doing here? And so it was sort of a mutual agreement. So that was the one spot I would say that, and yet out of the whole program, I would say that was really the only kind of like almost 100% resistance that I experienced. Otherwise, coaches were very open to it, and so many of them said, wow, I never thought about that. Wow, I never thought about that. Wow, well, that's cool. Who are we looking at mentoring here?
Mentoring, it's just that it's a necessary thing. And Kim, we've been talking about the pitfalls of mentorship, which is in reality what you do. And it's a matter of building that relationship and trust, Morris, which takes time. And it's the whole pitfall of minor hockey is people aren't educated like educators in terms of taught how to do things. And I know Jordan's on, whether he's able to input or not, but we talked about the education system as a grade 1 to 12 kind of concept. And, 4 years of education to teach at one level. So you go in with so much more hands-on control of the way they're educated. And what about in your area, Kim? Is it pretty receptive? I'm just guessing here, but do you get to select the competitive coaching staffs?
Yeah, I selected this year all the coaches like for next season. I didn't pick all the coaches for this season. Now, of course, in that process this year, I didn't get to evaluate any of the coaches on the ice because we weren't on the ice. So a lot of that was done based on relationships I've established with them over the years. So I've been the D1 evaluator for Leaside for 6 years. And I've done coach development sort of here and there before I got this official role. And I've also been coaching here for 12 years. So, it's not a reach to say everyone knows who I am. And I probably have a decent relationship with everybody and reputation. So the buy-in side of it, I don't think was hard for me and the coaches. But I do agree that the younger coaches in our association, the paid non-parent coaches are the ones maybe aren't the most resistant. Like they want information, but they still think they know better. And I honestly think the difference is they don't have kids themselves. And I don't mean that against them or that's a bad thing, but I do think when you're in a minor hockey association and the majority of the coaches are parents, I do think they see it differently. I also think, if you're a teacher or you've had some sort of teacher training, I think that even if you don't have kids, we do have a couple non-parent coaches who are teachers, and they definitely approach it slightly differently. So I'm certainly not saying having kids is a prerequisite. I didn't have any up till 6 years ago, but there is a huge difference, as Morris alluded to the ones who've, just coming out of playing pro, or, I've taught a couple hockey schools here and there and think they can and run it. And I think the difference is not on the X's and O's. The difference is on the soft skills, their ability to deal with issues, challenging scenarios, parents, culture side. If I said to any coach in our association, hey, let's talk about power play, they're all going to be very receptive. Or, hey, let's talk about skill development. But I find the resistance more on the culture side of it is sometimes from the younger coaches. And I think it's, as you said, they don't know what they don't know. They don't see the importance of it or the value of it or the necessity of establishing that culture early on. And then they get run over by parents and players as a result. So that's been my experience. But I would say, the hope in the future for me is to go and mentor with other associations in a similar capacity to what I do now with Leaside. And I think that will be very eye-opening because I won't have the longevity within the organization to kind of hang my hat on.
I'd just like to mention one thing. Angie Abdu. Hi, Sammy.
Hi, guys.
Angie's available on the 15th. I've spent a good amount of time with her. We did the mission statement exercise. She's coaching swimming now. I'm not sure if it's in Fernie. But boy, an articulate lady who absolutely gets it, everything we're talking about and some. And so on the 15th, Tim, we might mark that on the calendar. She's going to come on and, basically her book called Home Ice is really bang on with this conversation. Because after she wrote the book, which we would totally 100% endorse, the feedback she got from the associations and the community was, you don't know what you're talking about. And she basically has been pushed out the door, and her son quit hockey for 2 years. And he's back in now, and she's coaching swimming, and she's happy back in because he just wants to play. But in swimming, she's taking her certification. And so I've been sharing things with her about the swimming certification and the theory certification compared to the normal certification, which is just more X's and O's than anything, not science so much. But I see some questions are up. So Jordan, go ahead. We asked that question about the education of teachers and the ability to be on the same page and maybe easier to work with or not, or mentor or not. Go ahead, Jordan.
Well, I was just going to chat a little bit about the mentorship piece there, because of course having the opportunity to do it with both Hockey Alberta and with P3 out in Strathmore alongside Rick, it does tie in, Wally, to the way we work with staff in schools, and there's two parts to it. The first one is that evaluation supervision part, and then the other part is the mentorship. And the person who is being mentored has to understand which process involved in. And it probably won't be the same person doing both. Like with Kim just talking about the organization she's working with, that if she's evaluating and supervising coaches, she's probably not going to be the right fit for them to come to as a mentor, because many of them are going to see that as a role that if they're going to be evaluated, which is basically being judged, they don't necessarily want to be coming to them in that mentorship piece. So if I use the role here in a school, the admin are the ones doing the evaluation supervision. I can give guidance, but I'm not going to be the one that a teacher is going to come to talk about some areas necessarily that they're struggling in. That's my role as a supervisor, to get there and see if they may be struggling and then ask the appropriate questions. But we partner our teachers with people at the grade level or curriculum. If it was in the high school setting, it was the curriculum team. And we'd set up both formal and informal mentors, allow them to find their own people that they trust to have those conversations with. But also, when they're first coming in, we do set up a formal pairing, and sometimes those mesh and sometimes they don't. But usually the most effective ones is, as Tim had said, that if the person is reaching out to somebody to be a mentor, they're at the point where they're looking to gain information, as well as in that mindset where they're looking for growth. And so there's that piece. But the last portion, and this is the portion that I think that is missing in minor hockey, is that evaluation supervision piece, that formal one. And it's one where the coach knows who's going to be doing the evaluation supervision, how they're going to be evaluated and supervised, and basically a rubric or whatever that they're going to be supervised on. Because you may have an organization like with Kim, where she has 12 years of experience and is very comfortable in the direction in which the program is going. But in a lot of these, you may have somebody that's a parent volunteer on a board that has no experience working with people or evaluating, or heck, may not even have as much experience with the hockey side of things or the people side of things as the person in the position. So those are all little pieces, and I guess it goes back, well, we starting out with the organization having that mission statement piece, but that supervision and evaluation piece is to me is different than mentorship, and but both have a really important role in helping people be successful.
Tim?
I guess I would agree with that. I think for sure that maybe best case scenario, you separate mentorship from supervision and evaluation, but isn't the real world, and not that the corporate world does everything the right way, but that's just kind of real world. Like, you have a supervisor, they at some point have to evaluate you, but they're also usually tasked with sort of mentoring you and teaching you your job to some degree. So you know, it's a tough one. I mean, I think I would agree that, you know, it would be best to separate them, but I'm not sure that's really real world. That's how it works.
Well, I would ask you this question though, Tim. In if you want to call real world, the business world and education is different. That's okay. But if you look at it, how many times when you've been in a position where you're working, whether it's for a corporation or whomever, and you reach out to somebody else that you know that works in a similar field, in the same field, but they're working for a different company, and you run things by them, or you ask those questions rather than asking your supervisor. And that happens. Like I know that people run things by other people, and that piece. Even myself as an administrator, I was talking to other administrators, people that aren't even in my current jurisdiction, just because those are people that you trust and that you want to use as a sounding board. And that's truly where mentorship goes to when you're seeking that information, and those pieces. So I think that there is a role for separation of it, no matter the industry.
I agree that it's definitely better, but I'm just not sure it's prevalent or do it like I think I look at what your example that what you're talking about is not really mentoring so much as you just seek out some, you know, collaboration. I kind of see those excuse me, as being a bit different than having a sort of a, if you want to call it, a full-time mentor assigned to you. But you know, it's just a difficult exercise. You know, people are not the most secure on balance.
Well, what I would propose, Tim, would be somebody like Kim, being the one operating the association, saying that she's going to be supervising and doing the formal evaluation side of it, but then her contracting Tim, Wally, and all others as a mentorship group that introduced them as a group that coaches that could then take advantage of their experience and use them as mentors. But,
Yeah, I go ahead, Wally.
Well, I just wanted to say that when Angie's on the 15th, I think that's an important topic to get back on because, like ourselves, she's trying to influence change for the better. And it's the ethical side of that we're concerned with, you know, whether they can teach X's and O's and mathematics and those kind of things is one thing. So when Angie's on, I'd really like to revisit this topic again because no doubt we will get into it. She's done something good, and the general public has ostracized her for it. So go ahead, Kim.
Oops, sorry. I would say, you know, the challenge I have now is I've named all these coaches and I've sort of built these relationships. And of course, next year I will actually have to formally evaluate them, and I haven't done that yet. But in terms of mentorship, we've set up. I used to do it. I've done on my teams forever, kind of the buddy system. So an older player with a younger player. So we've established, like in our high performance program, we have 5 coaches, and so they're sort of sent up. And one thing we realize is you don't necessarily want to be mentoring like the level right beneath you. So the U13 to U11 is not great because then the teams kind of get mixed together and it doesn't always end well. So we've sort of staggered them by age group. But my intention is to establish that with the high performance coaches, but also loop in the non-paid coaches. The high performance ones are the paid ones, but you know, like I call them the real people, like with real jobs. And most of our high performance coaches also have real jobs. I'm the only full-time, actually there's one other full-time hockey person. But I do think, especially with those non-parent coaches, to loop them in. We've got quite a few coaches who've coached their daughters from novice all the way to midget, and to have them as a mentor who might not be able to, you know, run the drills the same way or maybe go toe to toe on the hockey side quite as well. They're going to have that bevy of experience of dealing with the crazy parents and the dressing room drama and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how it will all go, but we're sort of at the beginning of it. But I do see that buddy system, that internal mentorship being really important, as opposed to sort of me dictating from on high. I think they can learn a lot from each other if we formalize it a little bit within the organization.
Kim, I just, when you said the word evaluate, and you're going to evaluate it, it just dawned on me, and I learned this working with the national women, because we were evaluating you every day. And I think it's more important that you do your own evaluation, and the form that we provide is an awareness form of where are you actually at? What do you think? What do you think, your areas of strength are? And that self-evaluation, to me, would lead to more of a collaborative kind of communication on what's occurring as an athlete or as a coach or as a teacher. So I don't know if it's ever been considered in education, Jordan, but if you have a checklist or a formal sheet that you have to fill out at the end of the day, I find that just presenting that to the doing HP1 evaluations, I tell them to do their own. And when we sit down and talk about it, that's when I start my evaluation. Do they notice things? Are they willing to be receptive to conversations about things that to me would be cardinal? So I'm a little more hands-on in high performance evaluations. I'm concerned about the health of the players and the what's at stake for them in terms of their personal development and their hockey development as well. So somebody put something in 2002. Who was that? Type that in, Sam. Sammy, was that?
That was me. I was just going to attest to how great the evaluations were, Wally, I would say in my 98, 99, 2000, 2001 era, 2002. I really felt like I could voice my opinion in a safe space, which I think as an athlete is really, really important. And I felt like my concerns were heard, albeit not always changed, but heard and, talked about. And I didn't feel that way after that. I felt like the evaluations turned into, and I'm not actually even sure. I don't remember exactly what the evaluations were. Maybe Tim, you can voice in on that. But I felt like then the evaluations became, if I was to put anything negative on there, it was used against me. And it wasn't. That wasn't the. It wasn't a. Didn't seem like we were on equal footing at that point.
Are we talking 2002 or 2006? I mean, was it different? I missed that, sort of.
Yeah, so I would say that from 98 to 2002, so those 4 years, were the evaluations were pretty often. Like after every tournament, we would get evaluations even on the plane ride home to be able to fill out like everything from how was the food to what would you change to how did you feel. But then I never felt like that was the way after. Then the evaluations became more about your training and what you were supposed to be doing and are you doing it. So I don't know the forms and how much they changed, but I just felt that way as a player. And that could have been also part of the role I was in on the team. You're a starting goalie, and then in that second era where I'm fighting for a spot. So you just feel different too. So that could have been just a construct in my mind, or maybe that's just the way it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a clear memory actually from my experience here in sort of 4, 5, 6, sort of on that vein.
But we didn't do them very often, did we, Tim? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Like I don't really recall it being any kind of a regular thing. Sort of, end of the year. Yes, I know the one thing that struck me when I first started working, and I guess it was in the centralized year in particular, that Mel was quite sort of protective or hyper about, sort of sharing our thoughts about how Sammy you were doing. She's like, "Oh, well, the girls can't handle that mentally," and I'm like, but Mel, like, they want to know that, and they need to know that. And if we're all thinking, "Geez, Sammy is struggling," or "Sammy is doing really well," the same thing. I think they want to know that, and we need to know that. And if it's a tough message and they can't handle it, well, that's good for us to know. Like if they can't handle,
it's good to know where the athlete is starting from.
Yeah.
Like if you're coming in feeling that way and that your coach is feeling the same way, and you can have those conversations, I think those are important conversations to have. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe because it was so prevalent under Sauvageau, more so, I would say. But we're also in our infancy as a program as well. So I think the feedback was used to change things in the beginning, by the time Mel came around, it was things were more standardized. We had more things in place, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I remember is the whole Angela James thing, lawsuit controversy, that colored a lot.
For sure.
And
the Nancy Drolet too. I would say those two controversies really made record keeping either essential or also maybe we don't want as much information as is out there, right?
Yeah, I think both those things, like, just sort of, we got to be careful what we say and do, but we got to document everything, and
well, and that's probably no different than any other organization when you start in your infancy and you're just flying along and everybody's having a good time and you're working together, and then things like that happen. It definitely jades coaches, I would say. So I'm sure that within the program that happened as well. Wally, I think, has a question.
Yeah, you mentioned Nancy Drolet, and in 2002, I was the one tasked with preparing the case, and it actually was a case. Lawyers present, ourselves getting to speak as a staff about her situation and trying to rationalize and justify that decision. It was an 8-hour proceeding, very challenging. I wasn't uncomfortable with it because she had her points of view and her concerns, and we had a chance to explain the decision and how we made it from our point of view. And I didn't leave there feeling any worse, except it's a part of what you have to go through. And, I sort of live with that. And I think it's going to happen regardless. Those kind of things are going to be the case. And I just would make one comment. I assume my role at the time after 2002 with the branches and with the players who are on the carded list or going to NCAA and not on the teams yet. I had them do self-evaluations of their weekend performances and mail them to me. And I asked them to celebrate the good things they did. I did it in a way of their development and their continued, hey, somebody's paying attention to me. They care out there for the sake of the national team. And so I sort of looked at that role and the self-evaluation piece being a very important one, not only for players, but also for coaches. It's the same thing. And I think whether you're evaluating coaches in minor hockey or mentoring them, I think the idea of self-awareness is really what we're talking about. So good topic, really good topic. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Rick, you're starting a new gig out in Strathmore and it's not up and running. You had a bit of a go, but any comments at all? Well, I'm going to leave this until Angie gets on, but what was that, Morris? I didn't. You guys have to leave them on longer. My brain doesn't work as quick as the young brains.
You can read them in the chat, Wally, down
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. I've got the full page on now. So, well, I'm good on this topic, you guys. Tim, you sent out a couple of videos. I don't know if you want to get into that or not, but
No,
You know what, Wally? I will make one comment. In going back with the first, can you hear me?
yes, yeah.
Okay. With the mentoring that happened in Cochrane and in Medicine Hat, there was time wasted in establishing trust. So if a message could have been communicated to the coaches, but then I get perhaps that could have been worked through quicker. And then a second piece on it was much of what was given actually didn't stick. That was something I found fascinating, was that like in a practice, it could show the coach how just with a couple of tweaks, how puck touches could be increased in a huge amount. The coach, it's almost like there's a safety net that they want to go back to. And that would be one piece that, and it's possible through repetition, then the coaches could actually incorporate what was given to them and then use it. And then I will also, I'll also mention about how I was amazed at the resistance from the young coaches. And like I even did it in just in a suggestive manner. What would it look like to do this in our own end? Because this one thing keeps happening over and over, and we keep losing the puck. I mean, just like last night, the Canadians lost a game to the Jets where they give the puck away in their own end 3 times. And so that would happen. And even with the young guys, it was incredible. There just was an unwillingness to break away from tradition in order to embrace something new that might actually work. So whether it was tradition or stubbornness or like, what are you doing here? It was that was a piece that I wasn't able to break through. So that was my last piece.
Thanks, Morris. Something in minor hockey, we went out annually, and this year Morris went out. And normally, the way to get in the door is the degree of communication you have. So the routine was to go out and do the Coach 2 certification or Coach 1 certification. And all coaches ideally would have been there. And then they would run a nice time using the template model we had. Well, this year, Morris said only 3 coaches showed up. The previous years, as many as 40 showed up. So obviously, there's no communication if they're not there. So you're on the ice on the weekend with those coaches that weren't there and maybe new and may never have had been introduced to the program. But by doing the certification program, you're educate them about growth and learning, and that's an opportunity to get buy-in. That's why in Cochrane and Kim, even out there, those coaches are going to have to take Coach 1, Coach 2, Development 1, and if you can get people involved that are able to deliver those clinics in combine the ethical and the technical needs that you feel are required with the blessing of the Ontario Association, I think you've got a better chance for success in your base because you're there permanently and full time. And that will help get people on board. So that's just a thought on it. So.
Yeah, I think one thing we're going to be doing is, I guess, like an onboarding program, like with our coaches, especially, at the house league and the development stream level. A lot of the feedback we've been given by coaches is, they get into it and a lot of our coaches progress from house league all the way up to competitive, like maybe not the highest levels of a competitive, but that seems to be the trend. And a lot of them have expressed when they first started, they wish they had a how-to manual or sort of, what I would call now like the Wildcat way of doing things. So I do think, we want to give them some resources they can go back to. And I love, I've done a lot of events where you go in and you kind of, set the ice on fire and you're the show. And I think those are valuable, but then they actually need something they can take away and use consistently going forward. Because I think sometimes in those scenarios where you come in and you run the session or you run the practice, you may be, so far ahead in terms of where they are in delivering that type of information that it's just overwhelming to them. And they don't know even which details they should be focusing on. And they get too focused, I think, on the what you're presenting, the drill, the system, and they get, they're less concerned about the how. And I always talk to our coaches, well, when you blow the whistle, what do your players do? Well, some of them do this. And I said, well, what do you expect them to do? What should they do? Where should they be? Where are they standing? Are they kneeling? Like all these hows of how we run practices or run sessions, those are the things I think make it most effective coaches. But of course, and we all know this as coaches, we get lured in by whatever the Maple Leafs are doing on their power play or whatever the coolest drill is. So I do think you need to, steer them a little bit to the things that are going to be the most effective in them running practice, and it's not the latest and greatest drill.
Yeah, I think in in some ways, my response to that, Kim, would be, excuse me, that document we sort of put together as a group, mainly about the sort of guidelines for coaching, transmitting belief, stimulating curiosity, having fun, like some sort of big concept ideas to sort of guide the coaches would be important with respect to that, like sort of developing a Wildcat way, as you say, not so much focused on the day-to-day practice details, but more the ethical, philosophical side of what you're doing and how you're doing it is kind of maybe the first step along those lines. The education piece, technically, tactically, is obviously important to some degree, but that other part is paramount, I would think. Ollie?
Yeah, related to that, Kim, in Cochrane, and in the mission statement package, the introductory activity as they register is to fill out a 10-point form. And Kim, you might look at that form, change the logos on it and the wording for them to evaluate themselves, because it's exactly related to that. No X's and O's. And that in a clinic, as they fill it out while everybody's coming in, the looks of consternation on their faces is amazing, because it talks about rating yourself 1 to 10 in terms of your ability to communicate with parents and to communicate with kids. And there's 10 excellent questions. It's a Hall of Fame coaching form that was created by a friend of mine who has an ethical 4-hour program that is all about ethical coaching. And it's not just hockey, it's all sports. And it's something that is used by the associations I've worked with. That form in particular makes them think about how they're doing things, the way they're operating. So thanks very much for bringing that up, Tim. And I think, that's sort of the part of what I'm trying to do is really get that ethical piece solidified, and it's about education. So I'm not sure in education if it relates or the needs there, because there's a higher ethical standard in education. than what's going on in minor hockey. So, Kim?
Yeah, I would just add, to Tim's point, I do think there is a need for structured curriculum as well, right? So I do think the mission statement and the culture piece trumps everything else. That should be without debate, and it seems to be a consensus already within our association. So we already are on the right side of that battle. But now we're in the process of establishing if you could only really work on 5 key concepts with your team, what 5 would you pick? The things that you think make the most impact. I actually asked that of all our high performance coaches, and I just said, 5, so pass, reception, and pass, give, and receive was every single person had it on their list. Now, you might argue that is or isn't important, but if all of my high performance coaches are saying, yeah, this is something this is a key skill, then I'm going to take that information from our Bantam AA and up and filter that down into our U9 and U11 programs and say, if that's a hole we're seeing at our top end, then that's a hole we should start fixing, at the bottom end as well. So it's not to say you don't work on the other things, but it's sort of the 80-20 rule. If 20% of the stuff you teach could have a 80% impact, let's just focus on that 20%. Right? So things like deceptive skating or, in girls hockey, puck protection under pressure, open ice and along the wall, those things to me are going to have the biggest impact. But, in terms of buy-in, I asked those 5 high performance coaches who've all been coaching a long time, say, what do you think? And interestingly, all of them got back to me pretty quickly. It's amazing when you get something that's in their wheelhouse, how quickly they get back to you. And 3 of their 5 key points were the same. And there was I didn't prompt them with pick something from skating or passing or whatever, but I do think that's important when we go and deliver it to, the younger age groups or the lower levels. We can say, listen, the high performance coaches, we all collaborated. We came up with this list of, the 20% that's going to feed the 80% of our ice time. So it's not just me sitting on high saying, well, I think it'd be great if everyone could do that. So, that's sort of our first step in having a Wildcat curriculum. And I think it'll be, it gives us some signposts too, especially all the coaches know, right? You go into practice planning and you're like, oh, I could work on one of 8 billion things that you need to be able to do in hockey. But if we're going to focus 80% of our time on these 20% skills, I don't know. I think it will make the practice planning and the principles of play a little bit clearer for all our teams. So, I think that now that we know we have a good culture, and we can enhance it. And we're going to get Wally to come in and do the mission statement stuff soon. I think that's the next step. And if we could actually get everyone to buy in on the curriculum side of it, I'm not saying do a particular drill, but this is the 5 key things we need all our players to be able to do. I think we'll get pretty far ahead pretty quickly if we can get that level of buy-in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Kim. And then so your piece then, like that's a really great step one is what are 5 things on the elite side that you feel are missing in our game collectively. Then your next step is, okay, like you just said, I gotta figure out what are 5 sort of drills or ways to help develop that at the lower levels. And within those 5 or whatever it is, 6, 8 drills, what are the key teaching points that you can all agree on, in terms of teaching somebody how to pass, how to receive, that sort of thing. And before Wally says it, I'll say it, make sure they have a stick that's the proper length. That would be a good place to start.
Well, and that's the nice thing. It's our 2 main programs for next year, our high performance program and our U9, U11 kind of launch pad program. So I can take, sort of these ideas that we're, maybe doing at a slightly higher level at HPP and figure out, the progressions from where we would start with the 7 and 8-year-olds. And then I can fill in the blanks with all the levels in between that aren't necessarily addressed in those 2 groups. But we're trying this sort of both ends of the spectrum approach and see where we meet in the middle.
Go ahead,
Kim,
Wally. I just said something too, but go ahead.
Alan Andrews, he's done that. So be careful about reinventing the wheel and everybody reinventing the wheel. Alan's programs speak for themselves in terms of the high achievement players on the technical side, but more importantly on the ethical side. But Alan's work, which have been overlooked a long period of time, it's how to teach the fundamental skills. And I would suggest that being able to access those kind of fundamental resources and deliver them, he's got a laboratory in Prince Edward Island, a small province, small area, and he's doing those kinds of things, not under the blessing of the provincial governing body for 40 years, but he's doing things the right way. And that, it's one thing to just generalize passing, but boy, the importance of holding a stick and feeling it to catch and pass and shoot, those things are absolutely key and totally overlooked, ignored, forgotten about. So anyway, we've had 1 hour on this. That's pretty good. I never really anticipated it to go that long, but excellent topic. Just dealing with being better coaches and how to mentor people at doing those things.
So Kim, just before we leave that, I sort of mentioned the stick length thing slightly in jest, although I totally agree with, Wally's sort of take on that, and where we've kind of settled that, for sure, sort of probably under Pee-wee at the very highest level, AA, AAA, under that level, like if they don't have a stick that's the proper length, they're just probably going to have a great deal of difficulty enjoying the game and improving their skills. And you might be in a really good position to just say, hey, you want to play for Leaf side? Your stick's got to be here or lower until you get to be 13, 14 years old. And if you want to use a longer stick, then that's your business. But you'll learn to skate better, pass better, puck handle better, puck protect better, and shooting mechanics better, blah 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 blah. So anyway, you're in a good position to actually do something about that in a small way in the greater hockey world, of course, but.
Sammy, I see your comment on Suzuki's stick. Well, and I'm just sorry to beat that one to death, but thanks for bringing it up, Tim. They may not be able to teach how to hold a stick in terms of the fundamentals of that, but boy, the proper stick length is, I just can't. I've given up on it, but it's 40 years of seeing and believing and doing, and it is that important. So anyway, I'm good on that. Sammy, you like playing forward now?
So I love it. I've always loved it, as you know that, Wally. Love playing forward and D. But I have to have hip reconstruction surgery, so I am now limited to only playing forward and D. So I skate a little peg-legged, but I figure I'm not good enough to have any set in my ways principles. So if the Sharks are telling me to have a shorter stick, I should have a shorter stick. So it does take a little bit of time. That's the one thing, for kids that, I just didn't take the other stick to the rink. And I think that's what you guys are saying is you just can't join the Wildcats if you don't have this length of stick. That's just the way it is. And I'm testament to that you can teach old dogs new tricks. You can teach young dogs even better tricks. So,
Well, I'll be one of my greatest traits in this is I use a ridiculously short stick, but I don't bend my knees anymore, so that's probably problematic. But I would say 50% of the players, I mostly work with like Pee-wee and above in my total female hockey sessions, and I would say 50% of them have a stick longer than mine. And so I just say, well, I use this stick, and because they know me well enough and they know kind of my playing and coaching resume, that I'll just give them my stick. Say, here you go, you try it. They get frustrated by it, and sometimes they roll their eyes. But part of it is the modeling of it, right? I use that.
And I love that idea because I teach so many kids that I think that's half the battle. It's just the modeling of it, and I love that idea of being able to just pass it to them. And it is so whippy. It's a custom that Senna lived with us, so I don't even know what it is, but it's probably a 65 or 70 flex. And I was using like a Jana Hefford one from 2000 that was an Easton whatever it was. That was probably a 100 flex cut to 90 flex, and so anyways, I am now quite happy with it. It's changes are a good thing, and sometimes it's just you don't know any better. So I appreciate it, and I think it's definitely a message to disseminate. I think it's important.
Well, one thing I started doing, unfortunately, my kids all shoot the wrong way. They're all lefties. It's very sad. Next thing you know, one of them's going to be a goalie, and I won't be able to help them. But so I use their stick. I go out on the outdoor rink and I use their sticks. My son's pretty tall, but he's not that tall. And I'm trying to teach myself how to stick handle using his stick. It barely comes up to my waist. But it's interesting because you go into that beginner mindset, and I go, okay, how do I hold this stick properly on the left side? I've never done that before, right? If I was going to teach, a learn to play kid, how to roll their top hand and how to, not overuse their bottom hand. Like I actually am teaching myself it on the other side with this super, super short stick, which is allowing me to then go to my daughters and say, okay, you have to do this and try this. And, it's funny. My son doesn't seem to have the inclination to be, a full-time hockey kid here in Toronto, which is fine by me. But I taught him how to get his hands away from his body. And he's he skates around like this all the time. His top hand never even comes within, 5 inches of his body. And I thought, that only took a couple days to fix. And in girls hockey, it's an epidemic of the top hand glued to the.
I know, Bob, you have your hand up, but I just
Go ahead.
If you want to ask a question, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you got to caution kids when parents don't want to cut down these $200 sticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an issue. But when they do cut it down, it changes the flex immensely. So I've got sitting here in the corner behind me a stick of Brett Hull's. It's an 80 flex. I can show it to you if you like. And it probably, I'm not very tall, and I'm in my bare feet, it probably comes to my mouth. And Brett Hull's a bigger guy than I am. And that's an 80 flex, and that's the stick from the Stanley Cup in '99. So there's also a video out that I think Crosby and I think McKinnon are in it, and they talk about short stick. And I think that's something that every parent should be made to watch.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to figure out where the puck was. I have a fairly good shot for being a goalie coach all these years, where it was coming off. It was lagging behind. So it took me a little while to sort of kind of figure that part out. But I did an interesting podcast just recently. I haven't released it yet, but with Danielle Sauvageau. And we talked about how she didn't have a hockey background. She never got to play. It wasn't something that she got to play. And the similarities in how she really used Scotty Bowman as a reference. And that when Scotty was on the ice with us also, he was a terrible hockey player. Like he wasn't very good. But because of that, Danielle talks a lot about how she had to learn the game and really think about those intricacies. Like you said, Kim, you're learning it all from the beginning. And how would I teach this? And so she went through the process. And so it's really fascinating because I would have never said that she was a technical coach. But in fact, she did her technical presentation for her level 5 on goaltending, which really surprised me because I wouldn't have said that would have been her strength at all. But she had to learn it all from the get-go. And she figured that if no other coaches know about this, I should figure this out so that I can, figure. So I'm sure that, it says a lot about parent coaches that are coming into your organizations that don't know much about hockey, that, they could be even better coaches because they are learning it also at the same time.
I guess my 2 cents, which I think most of you have heard before, but Bob, in response, because you hear that all the time, is like the sticks are so expensive, and they don't want to cut them off because they'll outgrow them the next year. And my response always is, well, let's think about if your son or daughter was learning how to play baseball, would you give them major league bat that weighs like 38 or 40 ounces and have them try to swing it? Or if they're learning how to play golf, would you give them Tiger Woods driver and try to teach them how to swing it? You need size appropriate equipment. And anyway, so that's part of my pitch. And it's kind of funny. I in our outdoor rink here this year, like that's one of the things I'm always on the lookout for that stuff. And I managed to convert one kind of 12-year-old who's a pretty good player actually, and his dad played Division III. But I convinced him to cut his stick down just a little bit. It was Wally. I wish I had a video. It was friggin' amazing. Like he's a good little player, but right away you could see shooting, passing, mechanics. I'm like, wow, now you look like a player, and sadly there was a little 10, 11, 12-year-old girl who's a ringette player, could be a hell of a hockey player, and she's got the stick up to here, and her dad won't let her cut it off. Mom, I've totally sold on it. Even got to the point where I'm like, I'm cutting one of my sticks off and I'm giving it to you before I realize she's a righty and I'm a lefty, so it helped her too much. But anyway, just kind of anecdotes, but it's so important for enjoyment as much as anything. And that's the last thing is sort of on the size appropriate. I mean, it's just more fun to be able to, like this one girl, Rebecca, she sticks her nose in, she's gritty, she's fearless, but she gets a puck and she can't do anything with it. And she's not going to enjoy the game as much. So hopefully next year. Go ahead, Wally.
Just kudos to Hockey Canada and the branches. Exactly what you talked about, they cover. And in video, they cover the size of the ice surface with a USA hockey example, men playing on a soccer field, and talking about how difficult it was and imagining kids. So it's selling this rink size idea and the importance of small area games. And the other idea in tennis, they have kids on a tennis court and basketball court shooting at a tall basket. They're trying to make the same point we're talking about here. So in respect of what they're doing, these are the kind of things, when you talk about passing, these are kind of things that are that important, not just at that level, coach 1, coach 2, but to bring up later, because all of them have parents who have been taught about nose, top of the forehead defense, or nose defense, or chin, mouth maybe forwards. And there's some conditioning, there's some education to do here. And it's been around forever. Like Alan's programs have been in existence 40 years, and they've been able to get most of their candidates, of which Crosby and McKinnon are two of those candidates. And Tim has produced an Alan Andrews document on stick length and proper stick grip, and he's filled in the stats of all the NHL Hall of Fame players whose stick lengths are the proper length. So we've been through this topic, Bob, for many years and been promoting it, especially in Cochrane with the group we work for, because we've had a chance to talk about it together. So excellent conversation, everybody.
Well, Tim, I had a very similar experience at one of my skill sessions with a girl she's got to be 6'1", super athletic, coming from Bantam AA. Can you imagine a U15 girl, 6'1"? And she's actually a phenomenal passer. I gave her that compliment and she was like, oh, no one's ever told me that before. But she was light years ahead of everyone else, but she had a longer stick. And her dad's head of gym at one of the high schools in Markham. So I said, you got to cut your stick. She said, how much should I cut? So I took my pen out of my pocket and drew a line, and she came back the next day with the stick cut. She's like, okay. And she was, like you said, instantly, like she went I said, I called our midget AA coach. I'm like, you got to take this kid. She's like, why? I said, I cut her stick 4 inches and she just got 10% better, 15% better. Like it was an instant transformation of her ability to handle the puck, and it made her passing even better. And it definitely increased her shooting ability as well. So it was neat to see that. And the cool thing was, there's 15 other girls on the ice, all midget AA, junior, and bantam AA. And I took the opportunity to praise her on this choice, and they all had been on the ice with her for weeks, so they saw the difference too. Like it was pretty instantaneous, and all of a sudden I started to see a couple of them cutting their sticks shorter, right? So it was fortunate we got to have that great example with some very high level players on the ice. But she's been posting videos on Instagram or whatever of her shooting outside, and I always comment, oh, I see that short stick still looking really good out there. So hopefully she makes our junior teams pretty soon. But it was pretty cool to see that instant transformation for sure.
Yeah, it's great. Got a few of our Danish girls we've got to work on still. We're going to put it on the shelf till after the World Championship and try to get them there by the November Olympic qualifier that we have. But there's, like one of the D, same thing. One of the D, her stick is probably 4 or 5 inches longer than the one I use, and I know I've mentioned that before too. But anyway, it's quite the topic, and I still would love to do. I hope post-COVID, I hope I actually do this. I would love to get permission from the NHLPA and the NHL to, whenever teams come into Calgary here post-COVID, that I could go down and at first just do a real simple stick measurement thing, like as the guys are going on the ice, okay, where is it? Chin, inch below, 2 inches below, above, and then do a forward D comparison, of course. But I'm pretty certain that the best offensive players would all be on the short end of that. And if the best offensive players are there, they have it that way for a reason, and we could all benefit from it. Anyway, that's hopefully a little post-COVID project. I'd love to do that. Did anybody take note of the full moon happening in the NHL last night? 9-0 Rangers Philadelphia. Flames giving up 4 in the space of about 10 minutes in the third period. Was going the same way. To their credit, they actually responded pretty well. Which I'm sure was out of the fear of God, what was going to happen the next day if they didn't respond. But one of those nights, Markstrom wasn't proud of his effort. I'm sure he was a victim of deflections and stuff, but wasn't his best night. But it was definitely a full moon last night.
Goalie's always the victim, right?
Yeah. I'm sure they heard about it 2 seconds after they walked in the door last night, Tim.
Yeah. I think I started thinking of the Patrick Waugh scenario in Montreal when I saw the 9-0, and then because I didn't watch the third period of the Flames game till this morning when I got up, and I was like, oh, is he going to pull him or is he not going to pull him? And what does that mean if he does pull him, and how does he feel? But he just had a tough time, even though a couple of them were really no chance deflections, but two of the ones were pretty bad ones in the third period. Go ahead, Walt.
I was watching the game, the Flames game, and I changed channels and watched the Pavarotti special. And I was texting Tom throughout, and as I gave up on the game and changed channels. But when I went to bed, I caught the Sutter interview, Tim, talking about the goalie and being left in. And his philosophy is, no, I wouldn't pull him. And he explained why, that you've got to go through it, just like a player has to go through a bad game. And I'm sure he's had the conversation with the goalies, so they know where they stand on that. And over the years, I've always wondered if Patrick Waugh ever had that conversation with the coach about being pulled or not being pulled or about staying in there. I think it's really critical, Sammy. I don't know if you've encountered that before, but have you had coaches that talk to you beforehand, like proactively in case situations came up?
The only one that I ever had the conversation with was Ken Dufton, and he was a goalie. So I have never, ever had that conversation with coaches, but I now make a point of always having that conversation with my goalies, whoever, if I'm happening to work with a team. And I think the coach just needs to know, or the goalie just needs to know where the coach stands so that, I mean, the goalie always knows when it's your fault and when it's not your fault. But Wally, you were actually the only coach ever, and Ken never even did this, that if I ever did get pulled, would make an effort to come over and see me and say something nice. Because I think at that moment, that's all the goalie needs to hear. You don't need to hear how terrible you were or that your team is losing because of your team, because of your effort. You don't need to hear any of that. And I think, goalies do need to go through tough games, of course. But having that conversation, I think, is really key. And between periods, Ken and I would often have the conversation. He would say to me, do you want to come out? How are you feeling? Do you feel like you can regroup from this? It would be different if we were in a position where we could win the game. If it was like a 4-2 game, we would be having a different conversation than if it was a 5-0 game. You're just not feeling it, whatever. But he definitely made the effort to have those conversations. And I think, this is obviously 20 years ago. So he himself being a goalie, that made a big difference. Just that he thought about it. I think the other coaches, it wasn't that they were insensitive to the issue. They just probably didn't even think about having that conversation with coaches. So or with the goalies. I hope it happens more often nowadays.
Bob, go ahead.
I was just going to, just before you brought the topic up, Tim, I got a text message like 2 minutes before that from Carter Hart's uncle.
Oh,
and he says, "What happened to Philadelphia last night? 9-0. That coach may be gone if this keeps up. Do they need to stay with one goalie as their starter?" Well, this guy doesn't know anything about hockey. He was a football player at the U of A and a basketball coach. But every time Carter plays, he calls me to ask me about how he's doing. But getting with goaltenders, I always had a conversation with my goaltenders at the beginning of the year as to how they wanted to be pulled or not pulled and how they felt. But I also felt that you had to get a good feel for them, what their body language was. Was the team playing poorly? Was it just lucky, like stick deflections, or was he having an off night? But regardless, if I did pull him, I always did have a conversation with him immediately on the bench as to why. Sometimes you're just doing it to swing momentum in the game, right? So, but again, that's where I went back to last week when we were talking about goalies that people think they're weird. It's because nobody talks to them, right? Like they have to be treated the same as a player. If a player comes off the ice after he makes a mistake, do you not ask him, what did he see? Like what happened? Like you don't just jump down their throat or pull them off and have them with the dressing room. I mean, they have to be spoken to and have an understanding the same as the rest of the players. So I think Sutter is right. You do have to let them battle through at certain situations, but sometimes there has to be a mercy hook there too. And I think that's where the Patrick Waugh situation was that way back when.
Yeah. Sorry, Kim, just to interject really quickly on the Carter Hart thing, because I did notice on the highlights this morning, like the other guy started, right, and got pulled in the second, and
5-on-13.
Not in there for his first shot was a 2-0 like breakaway, shorthanded. The Rangers got a shorthanded 2-0 breakaway, and they scored. So welcome to the game, Carter.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think that kid is a tremendous young goaltender. I think he might be kept in the future, to be honest with you. But his uncle is just over the top every time the kid has a start. The uncle's just a basket case.
Well, I think, Bob, it was great what you mentioned about having that conversation. And I always joke I'm not a goalie whisperer, but I do, try to involve them as much as possible. And I usually say to them, my inclination, which is not to pull, like I just, and it happens quite a lot in our league, like how quickly coaches pull their goalies. Like it's actually a little bit alarming because we're dealing with like 16, 17, 18-year-old girls. And the majority of the players of the goalies in our league will end up playing college hockey. You know, by the fact they got to one of these 20 teams, almost all of them go on to play college hockey. It's very rare that they don't progress to that level. So I have that conversation kind of as Bob alluded to. I tell them what my tendency is, but then I make sure I have an assistant coach who's the goalie chatter all the time. So in between the second and the third, you know, she's the one who's going to go and talk to the goalies. If we call a timeout, she's the one who's going to go talk to the goalies. So that's established right out of the gate. And I also, I try to have letters on like the D end and on the forward end, but I will often have, if it's a CRA who's a D, she's also the goalie chatter. So if the goalie is having a bit of tough game, and the goalie already knows that that person's going to be her buddy and say, hey, like, how's it going? Is there something you want me to tell coach? Like, and it's actually been really interesting sometimes, those conversations, because I can send that D out in a face-off or right in between and say, okay, can you just go talk to Sally and see what she's thinking? And that's actually been really fruitful, because sometimes the goalie surprises me. It's like, no, I actually want to come out, or I want to stay in, or those types of things. And, you know, especially if you have a goalie like I had last year who'd let in one and then the next 4 shots are going in, almost, you know, guaranteed. You don't always have the time to wait in between the periods to have those conversations, and we have a timeout, but you may not want to burn it on that. But those are just couple little strategies I've used. But again, it's established before the season, so the goalies actually have more resources. They've got their own little dedicated people that they talk to, and it's made a big difference, I think, in the communication side.
Well, I think the goaltender's personality has to be taken into consideration as well. Like when I had Jamie McClellan, he didn't want to come out no matter what. He'd let in 8. He wanted to stay in. He didn't care. Brian Boucher, if he was having a bad night, he got 3 or 4 into him early, he wanted out. He wanted no part of being in the net. So I think you have to take the personality of the goaltender into consideration as to whether you're going to pull him or not pull him, or her.
I think that's a good point, Bob. I never wanted to come out, so I was always insulted whenever I came out. But you know, having that conversation with the athlete, I think, is so key. And just, you know, saying something, if it's somebody that doesn't want to come out ever, and you pull them, you know, you kind of have to build them up a little bit in that situation. You guys are all great coaches here, so it doesn't need to be said, but psychologically in that moment, it matters what you say. It matters how you handle, you know, because it's grief at that point. It's, you know, you feel like a failure. Usually the goalie that never wants to come out never feels like there's a good goal. Like, they always feel like they can make that next save, even though the coaches and 95% of the people in the arena know you're not making that next save.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was just on my way into work this morning, and they had the audio of Markstrom, and Markstrom didn't know he wasn't going to be pulled. And he said that had he known,
He looked like it too.
He said he would have reset differently, and I thought, well, that sounds odd. But with how well he has played this year, I guess he gets a pass on that. But it just, the mental preparedness side of it, you're saying that you're expecting to get pulled rather than reset yourself after a few quick goals. I don't know.
How did he feel about it in the audio? What was his?
Well, he said that he felt that he should have played better, and did take ownership on it. But it was just an interesting. I first was a little bit surprised that he did not know that they probably hadn't had that talk yet. Well, probably Sutter has had the opportunity to have all those conversations and at different levels and different coaches, they handle it differently. Like, I know that in talking with Malarchuk, that he had Brent Sutter as the head coach in Calgary. Brent always relied on Clint for knowing which goalie was feeling it at that time, and then he said when he had Hartley would just sometimes not even talk with the goaltenders when he was deciding on who was going to start in back-to-back situations or whatever. So it's a different thing. But as you've said so well, Sammy, is that You are people, not they are. And people, and they need to be taken care of that way. And Bob, that's a good way of putting it too. In that, if you would ask a player how they felt about a shift or whatever, you should be asking goaltenders the same thing. Um, Probably not when they're throwing their stick or blocker or hitting their helmet like Markstrom or like Riddish did the other day, but that one. But
You have
I'm
to change your question though, because you can't say to a goalie, "Hey, what did you see there?" Because it's pretty obvious they didn't see the puck.
uh,
They'll just say they saw the defenseman's big ass in their way.
Yeah.
yeah, either block the puck or get out of the road.
Yeah. Go ahead, Molly.
No, so I'm gonna hop off here. I've got to go out to do some supervision and a couple other things on the go. I will send a link that Clint had posted. Was about his very last NHL game when he was playing with Buffalo, and it happened to be in Quebec City where he had started his career. And his comment on posting it was, "I could tell. You can easily tell now what mental state I was in." He was involved in two. He was run over 3 times. Involved in 2 where he dropped his gloves and was once he was trying to fight with Tony Twist, and the second one he was with Sakic, so it wasn't really like that was going to end up being a fight, but he had all those things going on in it, and I can't imagine where my makeup was at that time. So
Bad dance partner, Twister.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah,
See
you as
George.
well.
Go ahead, Wally.
Yeah, just put my hand up related to generational coaching and generational playing. The communication piece, I think the generation of coaching and playing has changed. And so, Sammy, I don't know whether I was ahead of the time or I was just raised differently, but I was very sensitive to other people's feelings. And as a result, I was conscious of that as a coach. And when Patrick Roy got pulled back in the day, immediately my first thought was, well, don't they have an understanding? So when Jordan mentioned that about Daryl not having communicated the way he would coach and prepare the player to handle it, that's very old school. And you have to educate players. Even today, they're going to be coached by coaches like that. So I think in minor hockey, it's important, and in junior hockey, it's important to realize you're not all going to be coached the same way. And you've got to live with that. But understanding the importance of communication as a coach and the impact it can have today, you need those conversations or you won't be coaching long. I think with today's generation of players, there's still, obviously coaches are being hired to be fired, and that's the cycle. And I'm not worried as much about the NHL as I am preparing players through minor hockey to go, to move forward and cope with whatever they have to deal with. So that was a real good topic. Boy, I've got 5 pages of notes here already, and I don't want to lose sight of this because I've got a lifetime of things to play with here. Thank you very much. So,
Well, maybe Sammy just sent a note. Maybe we'll just she's got to get off. Take a quick look at the one video I sent. And Bob, I apologize. I don't think I sent it to you, but last night. But I'll share this screen, and because Sammy and I had a bunch of these clips that I'll end up using with the Danish girls, but I sort of titled them all sort of what do we like and what do we learn from these clips, and this one, a couple of them are from they're from the Danish Elite League semifinal between Brynäs in black. They were the second place team in the league, and HV, and they were, I think, fourth in the league or something. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
So
anyway,
one thing because I do have to leave quickly, that I'm going to point out to all of you guys while you're watching it is, as the player is coming, this happens a lot in the NHL too for goalies. So obviously I watched the clip from the goalie's angle, but she's coming through, and this goalie here should be out above her post and not have her foot linked already to the post, which is causing her to go down in a reverse VH, an RVH, and it will make her blocker end up on the ice, which it never should be. She should just be in a position facing that player, which then forces her to then have to, from that position, recover very quickly, which she does a really great job of recovering from her mistake. But it is a mistake. So a lot of players in the NHL, I think it's 24 in black, will come in, see the goalie have gone down in this position and put it over their shoulder. You see she has an opening right there. NHL players can hit that. So if you just keep going with the clip, Tim, you'll be able to see the save she makes, which is great. She recovers because it pops out in front and she has to make this huge save. But in essence, I mean, it's a great shot and it's a great save. It should be just an easier transition from her post to just stepping over to the middle to make that save. I just want to make that comment because probably lots of you guys, what I need to hear is all of your comments on all of the other things going on in the ice, but unfortunately I do have to run.
Sammy, before you go, my criticism of NHL goaltending is the butterfly forcing them to go down soon, and precisely what you're talking about. They're very prone top corner. They may be more conscious of it right now since the games got started, but
I was doing the color commentating for the Montreal game on Monday night, and the previous game that Montreal played on Sunday, the same thing happened. I think it was Jake Allen went down, and the guy just roofed it right over him because he saw the opening. So it happens. And what I noticed the next game, Carey Price, he was stepping off the post, and he was just in a butterfly. He was just in a stand-up ready position, not going down. So if your foot is on the post like that, you can't help but go down. You get squashed into this reverse VH. Rather than just playing it like it's just a player coming in on a breakaway, essentially. So anyways, that's my 2 points there. But I do have to run over to my client. But great to see everybody.
Take care.
all right.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Sammy. So I was hoping to ask Sammy there that I knew she had to go. Like right here, it looks to me like the goalie is quite aware and thinking 2-on-1, and she's getting ready for the pass coming this way. So she might be a bit guilty of just not playing the shooter square up, and I think that's kind of mainly Sammy's point. But it looks like she's anticipating a pass here, but anyway.
That would be my thought, Tim.
Yeah.
Tim, my point is on that goalie thing, what you think and what Bob thinks, what did the goalie think? Do we know? Are they aware of what Sammy talked about and what you and I think? And that's really the important part here, the conversation. Such a small point, but the essence of performing in that particular moment, the awareness of what was going on, just the consciousness of it. So moving forward, you might make better decisions at your position. That's what really is important here. I thought they played the 2-on-1. She played the 2-on-1 well, Tim.
Yes, I think she's played the 2-on-1 really, really well, Wally, there. She's taken away the pass for the most part. So that goalie, to me, I think the goalie is thinking pass. But where that defenseman is, she should be thinking shot, because I think the defenseman's done a pretty damn good job there. And there is some back pressure. She's got no room to, I mean, she could cut into into the net a little bit, but to me, that goalie should be standing up and thinking shot there.
Yeah, and it begs the question, have they had the group conversation that we often have advocated, that have the discussion with your goalies and with your defensemen, like what are we aiming at, and what are we trying to do in these 2-on-1 situations? Are we focused on denying the pass and giving the goalie the 1-on-1? Are we focused on pressuring the puck and trying to force a bad pass, so that the goalie and the defenseman are on the same page? And to your point, Bob, it looks like they're not on the same page here. Like the goalie is just thinking, the pass might go across, instead of thinking, I got to stop the shooter here.
Yeah. What's your philosophy here, Tim?
I'm a big deny the pass thing. I think it's the hardest thing for the goalie. The whole Royal Road thing. There are going to be points where, and this gets close to it. There's going to be a point where this defenseman might have to think about sliding. Like if this girl had cut tighter and was going to be a real threat at the net, then the slide is a tool that I think all defensemen should have in their toolbox. You shouldn't say you can never slide, but my basic starting point is, let's take away the pass as much as we can, crowd the shooter at the same time as much as you can. But I think there's lots of evidence that if you force the shot, there are fewer goals that result.
Okay, this is for Julia. What's the defenseman's name from Calgary here that plays in Winnipeg?
Josh Morrissey.
John Morrissey, yeah. So his dad's of the opposite philosophy. I've had this discussion with him when I was mentoring one of the Royals teams, and his other son was the goaltender. His philosophy is you should always go at the guy with the puck and make him make a bad pass or a bad shot. And I could never get. He tried to explain it to me in 6 different ways, and I couldn't understand why he would want that. He was having him attack the guy even at the blue line. He'd leave the guy wide open across the ice, and I couldn't understand what his thinking was there. Because my thought was always stay between, shade the pass receiver a little bit, and make the guy play 1-on-1 with the goalie. Let the goalie have him. And then my thought was always too, after the shot, that the defenseman takes the open guy, and the goalie has the shooter. He's got his rebound. He knows what he's got to. If he leaves a rebound, he's still got the original shooter. The defenseman eliminates the other guy. I don't know. That's always been my philosophy.
And it's interesting you say that, Bob, because we've had this discussion last year with Dan Price, the Royals head coach and GM, who's a pretty sharp guy and a terrific coach. But he is really migrating, or at least seriously wondering if the Morrissey method, if you want to call it that, isn't a better philosophy. Like it's his sense, without any statistical backup, but he maybe has since done that. He said he was going to, but it's his sense that when you try to force the pass, like obviously you can, they can make a bad pass, you can break up the pass, but if you force the pass, he says it's his sense that little mini breakaway you give up, they never score on that. And I said, well, that's really interesting, Dan. Like, do you have any stats to back that up? And he said, well, no, but I'm going to go back and search. So I'll maybe try to touch base with him on that to see if he ever did. So I like to mix the two philosophies. Like if you can bluff or fake or force a pass like above the circle tops, that's a good thing, because you might break it up. They might make a bad pass. Somebody might not receive it very well. Above the circle tops, I like to try to force a pass. And as long as your goalie knows that, then that helps the goalie out.
Yeah.
But so I like to mix those two philosophies. But I'm kind of not in that group where you want to give up the pass myself.
Well, it worked for Paul Coffey in the Canada Cup, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been the other way, but I understand now you say above the circles. I might buy that, create a little panic in the puck carrier. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to
Yeah,
comment?
Rick's
Yeah,
got his hand up.
I'll throw a couple of comments in there, fellas. For me, I agree with Bob and Tim's general outlook on that, but the further factor of my benefit is the longer you can delay that shot to the net, whether by the shot or by the pass,
Yeah.
the offensive team usually finds a way to mess that up all by themselves. Whereas if you force the issue, you create opportunities that they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's been my longtime observation, and I'm a D man as well.
I've got
Yeah,
a comment on that too, Tim. I got my hand up. I don't know if you can see it,
No,
but
I can't. Sorry, go ahead.
sort of evolutionary. Back in the day, Tim, when you skated at our conditioning camps, I had a number of defensemen. Greg Jolly was one that mentioned to me exactly that. 2-on-1s stand up before the blue line back in the day. And he didn't explain it. The goalie can, you can create more havoc. I think that what's happened in today's game, Rick, is defensemen are more forward skating oriented, join the attack oriented, and less gap control oriented, playing rushes conventionally. So when Dan Price is talking about standing up, it relates to surfing, influencing the puck sooner than later, and it's changing. The game's evolving and changing. So I'm not sure where it's going to go or what the best way is, but it's all great stuff. Tim and I were brought up on and Bob, take away the pass. Dave King added the term bluff back in our day. Pretend you're going to go and they'll likely pass right back to you. But the game today, playing rushes, holy cow, it's, there's different skill sets that players are lacking and have to use what they've got to benefit from that. So I'm very surprised. I might call Tom Morrissey. I taught with him. He coached the basketball team at the high school I worked with, and I know him really well. So I'm definitely going to call him and have that conversation. I'll find out more later about his thinking. So I see Tom Malloy's hands up.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just remember I had a conversation with Jyrki Lume when I was doing a hockey camp in Varimaki, and that's when Vancouver beat Calgary, and he had a 2-on-1 with Fleury and Reichel, and he overplayed Fleury because he said he wouldn't usually, but he said Fleury had scored on a rush from about the dot. He took a shot and beat that goalie that was it Kirk somebody or
McLean.
anyways, yeah, McLean. So he overplayed Fleury, and Fleury got the pass over to Reichel, and Reichel put it top corner, but McLean threw his leg up there and made the save that won them the series. But he said that was his thinking there. Because it was Fleury. So I'm saying it depends who the player is too. If you got some slug going down there, maybe you let him shoot and you make sure the pass doesn't get over. So a little bit of reading that too.
So what are you going to do with McDavid? Pray?
Well, he shot right at him last night. Went right under him. The goalie was guessing 19,000 things, and
see, and
so
that's my reason why I think you have to take away the pass so the goalie doesn't have to think. Let him have one thought, the shooter. I kind of see where Tom says, like up high in the like early at the blue line between the blue line and the top of the circles. Maybe I can see that because then that little mini breakaway, it's a one on the goalie there, and no decision to be made because it's far enough out. He's got time. Boy, the closer you get to the net, I think the more imperative it is to take away the pass.
Well, I think if McDavid's going down on his off wing like he did yesterday, you play him more. But if he's going that same one on the left side, I think you play the pass more. So I think it's a read too, the player and the side he's shooting from, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think at the highest levels, like that can be a factor. Like know who you're faced with on the 2-on-1, at lower levels, I don't think they're going to really take that in. Anyway, the basic point is that it's important to have a starting point for the goalie and the defenseman. Like what's our basic philosophy, and the game is read and react, of course.
So would you look
And,
for
just
handedness?
throwing really quickly, like on Wally's sort of surfing point is, Peter Ellender, who I work with the Danish team, he and his son's a pretty good 16-year-old D. He coaches his son in those situations. If the shooter's stick is on the inside, kind of like Tom was just saying, that's a time where maybe a surf and a force of pass is maybe a higher percentage play than if the stick is on the outside, where it's way easier for that player to protect the puck and or reach around you. And I'm not totally there with that. I still think my basic philosophy of force a pass up high, then take away the pass below the circle tops. I'm still there, but Peter likes the sort of surf and force a pass if the stick's on the inside. You're obviously a bit more dangerous shooter there too, but
Tim, I've got my hand up about the minor hockey thing you talked about. Yeah, there's a progressive way of educating coaches fundamentally how to play a 2-on-1 a traditional way, and then there's a highly competitive one with all sorts of decision making. And I'm thinking at the NHL level, on the question of how to play McDavid, that's a conversation you have to have with the players, and they have to communicate with one another and the goalie in all situations. Years ago, I was mentoring the Royals. I sat in on Lowry was doing a talk, and talking about situations. Or it might have been Dave Marcoux, and he was talking about giving Kiprasov and playing a 2-on-1, giving him the shooter, so overplay him. And I brought up my concern with telling coaches at this level, the Royals Association, how to play 2-on-1s individually relative to, to do that kind of thing. They need to have a basic framework of how to play situations. And when I was working with the association and talking with the sort of a young guy, a head coach mentor, they were watching a practice, a Bantam AAA team. They didn't know how to play 2-on-1s. I just watched a drill and I talked to them about, well, how are they playing 2-on-1s? They couldn't explain it to me. So that's my concern about minor hockey, and the right stuff, right amount, right time, right way at any level. So I really appreciate the fundamental approach. And I don't know to what degree, Tim, you take your Norwegian girls and give them some freedom to figure things out and do things differently. But can you comment on that maybe?
well, I think we do take the approach that, as I just said, that we've had that discussion about if you can bluff and force a pass early, that's a good thing. Don't you got to stay in the play. Like you can't go over and bluff and take yourself out of the play to the point you give up a free breakaway, because I don't really like that. But if you can bluff and fake and force a pass early, crowd the puck carrier early, then that's an opportunity for a bad pass, intercepting the pass, a bad reception. That helps us. But then below the circle tops, take away the pass as much as you can. And the last thing is, you can't take away the pass. There's got to be an element of crowding the shooter too. You can't allow that shooter just have a free look at the full net. Like you got to help the goalie protect half of the net. So you got to crowd that shooter a little bit, and we feel like that's the best chance to high percentage play. So there's sort of three elements there, and I don't think that's too much.
Yeah, can I just, sorry, go ahead, Tim. I was going to add one more piece that we focus on just at the end of the 2-on-1 or at the end of the sequence that I found had a maximum impact with our team is to turn and take the opponent's stick away. So I think early in my coaching career, I didn't focus in on that detail. And, a majority of goals in girls hockey are kind of scored off the garbage that comes off a 2-on-1 or off a 2-on-2. So just reinforcing with our defender or back checker to turn around and look north and pick up sticks after it's finished. Like I said, I glazed over it. I didn't maybe connect the dots between net front defense and defending the 2-on-1. It took me a while, but that in girls hockey seemed to have a very instant impact on our ability to deny a second shot on net. So that would be the only detail I would add. That seemed to work well with the minor hockey level.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of to Bob's point that, if you're in a position, like you haven't slid or whatever, you're in a position to do something after the initial shot, assuming it doesn't go in the net, then that would be my default, is make sure the stick coming to the net is taken away, because the goalie can much easier deal with something in front of her, presumably. Like if the shooter gets a look at their own rebound, that's still easier for the goalie than something on the backside where they have to get over and cover 4x6. So I definitely would agree with that.
But well, Tim, my conversations with all the goalies I've coached at the higher levels is exactly that. They want the shooter and they want their own rebound. They feel it's their job to put the rebound into a bad position so that there shouldn't be a second chance. But if there is, they know where the puck is. They know where it's gone, and they feel they have a better chance of playing the rebound shot off the original shooter than something that goes off their back pad and out to the offside, right?
Yeah. And just really quickly, we don't need to beat this clip to death, but the other reason I'm probably going to show this to our Danish D and or Danish team and say, hey, what do you like? What don't you like? There's obviously some good offensive stuff in here too. But one of the things I want to see if our D recognizes that this D is in a bad spot right now. The puck carrier got her eyes up. They're staring eyeball. I call it eyeball to eyeball. When you're eyeball to eyeball with somebody in a one-on-one, as a defensive player, you've got to err on the side of caution. This is not a time to surf, to force. A good offensive player has the advantage when you're eyeball to eyeball, and that's exactly what happens here. This defenseman tries to force the issue. Like, she feels like she's got a lot of support, and she does. So you could make that argument, but she's got poor stick here for me. She's trying to get it on puck, but I'd rather steer, like get my stick here and steer that player down the wall. But it's just a bad one, overly aggressive one-on-one, and I guess she doesn't get much help from her back checking forward, who kind of lets her foot off the gas. And there's another little lesson: if you got a 1-on-2 here, if you're forcing, then it's a nice thing if this D sort of has the sense that 1-on-2, I can step up, you come in behind me to clean up the mess if there is any. But this forward is clearly just shuts it down and doesn't really help at all. It's kind of, so there's some interesting detail there.
Tim, I got a point here. The back checker, in my mind, and it's not what I think, but would the back checker have been better off pressuring the puck at that point? Because there's gliding, and she could have created that situation. There's a back checker surfing the puck carrier, continue the surf, allowing the defender to stay in the middle. And that's my thought. What are they thinking? Do they see this in terms of working things and figuring things out?
Well, it's not a bad thought, because clearly it perhaps could have worked out. I don't like these situations where the offense gains the blue line. our instructions generally are, if you're a back checker and you can't eliminate this player by the blue line, then you should be focused on somebody else, and this would become the D's man. Because what happens when that back checker keeps coming? What's the obvious play here? Is to drop it here.
Drop it. Yeah.
And so this D cannot cover this player. This back checker can easily eliminate that player one-on-one, one-on-one, one-on-one. That's the ideal way to handle it. Having said that, I would agree in this situation, the D had such a brutal gap that it might have been better for the D to just wave this forward to stay on the puck carrier and then be prepared to step right up. It would have been a possible solution.
Yeah.
And to Sammy's, in some ways, somebody made the point, like, if I'm the offensive, looking at the offensive side, I probably would have wanted 24 to maybe attack the net a bit better there. But this is incredible vision by her to know that 41 is going to be open. And I don't even know. I just had a thought. Did she? Oh, it hit the goalie's stick.
I think it came off the goalie. Yeah.
Yeah, she was trying to make the pass to the player in front of the net. At first, I thought, man, how did she know this player was there? But she's trying to make this pass right here. And it hits, and the goalie gets her paddle down, and it goes right here. Yeah. Hell of a glove save. Anyway.
But going back to the blue line there, Tim, I think that's where communication, that you have to know what each player is going to be responsible for there.
Yeah.
Right? Like that drop pass is definitely there. The back checking forward could have taken the puck carrier. The defenseman really has poor stick position and overcommits too soon. Like she has a poor angle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's a lot of things defensively there that could be changed, but I think that's something that they could easily practice. I mean, the forward has totally kind of given up on the play. Is maybe anticipating the drop pass. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I just really like again, if the forward can physically engage this player by the blue line, I'm all for it. Keep coming. If you can't, then think about a trailer. So right here, if she just says, okay, that puck carrier belongs to the D and I'm going to eliminate this trailer, then it becomes, like you said, it becomes one-on-one, one-on-one, one-on-one. There's help coming here. And then there's D, if she's just patient, lets this player carry it deep in here and then maybe confronts down in this area, I think nothing happens there. But
well, that's how I would play it. Exactly how you described it.
Anyway, I think fun discussion, good discussion. Anybody else? Anything else? I always
Tim, I was gonna say I've been watching the NCAA. I watched the quarterfinal games, 3 of the 4 quarterfinal games. My former captain is the captain of Providence College, and she's a defensive defenseman. Has always been a defensive defenseman, and they drew Wisconsin in the quarters. So needless to say, I think Wisconsin outshot them 47-13. So I looked at the whole game is online. So I've been clipping out clips of my captain, Chloe. And interesting, the 60-minute game, she's on the ice for 42 minutes of it, which is, they only had 5D, but she's a defensive defenseman. So basically, Daryl Watts is on the second line for Wisconsin. That's how good they are. And so Chloe's basically out there. She's getting 20-second breaks, but I have a ton of great video. The video feed from the NCAA.com is quite good. It zooms in quite well, but it's really great to watch her defending. She's an elite level defender against elite level forwards. So it gets some really good clips in terms of how to defend in one-on-one situations. So I can share some of those with you, but I hadn't thought to myself how important it was to get examples of great defenders against great teams when cutting video, right? If you watched Wisconsin against another team that's maybe Northeastern, I don't know if they get as many options, or if you watch two weaker teams, you're maybe not going to get as many great clips. But Providence is a weaker team, but she happens to be the best defender on the team, so she's in all the challenging situations. So I cut video from the first period. I already have 8 good clips, and there's some I didn't take. So lots of good stuff to share there. Hopefully,
Yeah, well, please share them, because I'm sure there's a few that I'd love to use with the Danish girls. So go ahead, Wally. You got your hand up, or is that from before?
No, I'm gonna put it down. Sorry.
Oh, I got it. I can put the hands down.
Okay.
So, anyway, yeah, that'd be good, Kim. Send me a few. Good one-on-ones. I've got a bunch of those that, we're gonna have a lot of Zoom time when we're in Halifax, so we're going to be in the hotels for 7 days or whatever. So I'm not sure what exactly our plan's going to be, but it'll be some good opportunity to just have a half-hour meeting with the D and just say every other day, and just watch a few one-on-ones and two-on-ones and get all that stuff straight. So,
well, they've been doing sort of 3-minute highlight packages from each game, and of course they're offensively driven, but it's not often these clips are made for Sportsnet or TSN or whatever, but this is just the NCAA doing it internally on their own site. So it's edited quite well, and they do actually show a couple defensive and a couple saves. It's not purely offense, but the quality of the clips is quite good, so you can go in and pull from there. In my quest to build my female hockey library, this has been a good bounty of clips for me to pull out in terms of getting good quality and well filmed clips that get zoomed in at the right time. So,
and is that like on US CHO? Is it on
just NCAA.com, and you just search by sport. So just go to the sport and click over to women's ice hockey, and it's got all the recaps. It's still got the full games of all the other quarterfinals on there, so you can get the entire game. Or I've been screen capturing from the entire games. But like I said, I was particularly interested in the Providence one because of my former captain, and I want more defensive clips. I just because most of the clips I've gotten from the PWHPA or the NWHL are goal clips, right? That's what their highlight packages are. So now I can actually go in and cut video on the defensive side of the puck, which is, that's my goal is to be able to create a library of female clips that our coaches and our players can access. So I think it's great. My former captain's in a lot of these clips, so I can say, oh, there's a Lee side player doing this against some of the best players in the world. And maybe one day I can have all Lee side clips, but I don't know if we'll ever get there in terms of the filming. But it has been powerful to just show the girls those female clips and then have a library of it that they can access. So that's kind of the direction I'm going in pulling all this stuff out. But I'm definitely including some of the clips you've been sharing as well from the European leagues.
Well, good to know. I'll maybe try to check that out. And my ability, I don't know whether it's my QuickTime version, my old computer, but I don't have much luck with the drawn video from screen sharing kind of thing. I'll have to see if I can download some of those packages and then put it in my video converter. But I need to get a new computer.
Well, there's a great highlight I posted on my social medias of a block by a forward on Wisconsin, and it's the most picture-perfect block you've ever seen. She's coming out at the point. She's, she gets tight. She has stick on puck. It goes off her arm, I think. She's in full. She tracks it with her eyes perfectly, chases it down, has it on her stick in 3 strides, does a great cutback on the goalie. It would have been even better if she scored at the end. But the camera angle is such you see the shooter shooting right into the block, and so you see this perfect alignment of her stick and her head and her body. That's like I said, I posted it today, but it's nice when the camera gives you the perfect angle for those types of things. So I think she gets from going down in the block to getting the scoring chance. I think it's 8 seconds. It might be 7 seconds from inside her own blue line all the way down. I can't remember the player's name. Schneider, maybe? She's American. But it's great to find clips like that and show how defense drives the offense, especially for the players who seem to think they only need to play on the offensive side of the puck.
Not Malia Schneider.
No, it's what's her name?
She's from Burlington or somewhere.
I have the clip here. I'm trying to let me look it up. No, this one's from Illinois. Caitlin maybe Schneider. She's not a big scorer for them. She had a ton of chances in that game against Providence, though. I was actually shocked. I've never really watched Wisconsin as a group, but no, there's been a lot of D's scoring too in the first 2 games were UMD winning and Northeastern, and 2 D's scored the game-winning goals in those games. So, just trying to. I don't know what I'll do once I have to start cutting goalie clips. So maybe I'll get Sammy to do that for me. But trying to get more of the D and forward stuff. But no, like I said, the NCAA stuff's great. It's such good hockey. Honestly, it's as good, maybe even better than some of the PWHPA because they've been practicing more, right? So the execution, that Wisconsin team is loaded for bear. It's quite scary. But
so what is it at? What's the series at, Kim?
The semis are today. There's a 2:00 and a 7:00 semis today. There's
and
one
who
in
is in it?
The teams left are Northeastern, Minnesota Duluth, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. Okay. So I think those are UMD had the upset. I think they're the 6, but Northeastern's 1, Wisconsin's 2, and Ohio State was 3. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I can see how Northeastern is 1 based on their record, but Wisconsin's talent level is it's unbelievable.
I've got a question about the NCAA. I watched. Jordan sent me the link, and I'm watching previous games. One of the players from Cochrane that Jordan coached is on that team, and I got to watch her try out with the Chinese team. Evaluate in Toronto earlier this year. So I was quite curious about watching her play. And my question is not the X's and O's of what they're doing well or not doing well. At the NCAA, she got maybe 6 minutes of ice time in the whole game. And I know it's the playoffs and whatnot, but Courtney Coleman's a girl who left here, came back to Mount Royal after 2 years of having to live with the philosophy of coaching there, where you might get to play power play in your 3rd and 4th years, very limited time, limited ice time, relative to what they're accustomed to on a play all situations first half, earn your role in the second half. And I don't know the ability to cope with that with your players. If you coach them to play all situations and morph into roles, boy, they've got to be educated to handle that challenge so they don't quit and come back, or be prepared for the decision making to handle it, cope with it, and put up with it until their 4th and 5th years. And Tim, you've coached down there, the more experienced players in terms of number of years. Did they have an expectation they deserved to play the power play more than earned it?
There's definitely a sort of a senior-centric kind of thinking down there, which I didn't like. I didn't really adhere to. I just tried to put the best people in the best situations according to their ability. They've done that for years at U of A, where even, to a great extent, they give sort of preferential treatment to the seniors on the team, both men and the women, and I've never really liked that sort of approach.
Well, it's interesting, Wally. I was watching Wisconsin, and I know a D on Wisconsin who was on pretty sure she's on Team Canada U18. She didn't get a single shift in the game. Now, I know the kid and I know the family really, really well. So she's on the bench. I looked it up online. She's been dressed for all their games this season. But but I also think she's going to Wisconsin for a reason. You go to Wisconsin, everybody's on the Olympic team or on the national team. Your expectation going into that has to be tempered by the fact you know who you're going in with, right? So there's a kid who's Team Canada U18, and she didn't get a single shift from what I saw in a game against Providence that they clearly dominated from the first puck drop. And that's not a knock against the kid. She's a phenomenal defenseman. But I wonder what, and I'm sure with Mark Johnson there, like the messaging, like she wouldn't have necessarily gone in there and expected to be the go-to, but their second line has a kid who's Lacey Eden, who was one of the best players on the ice, and she's a freshman. So I wonder at schools like that, like the Minnesotas and the Wisconsins, where there's the expectation you're going to get to the final every single year, and you just keep recruiting, the best of the best of the best. Now you've got Team Canada, Team USA kids who don't even get a shift. Like that's got to be really hard to deal with. And I wonder how they temper those expectations as the players are coming in, or do they say, "Oh no, you'll be one of our best D," and then they get shut down to reality when they don't make it? I'm not sure, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I relate
when you're that good.
I relate that to Daryl Belfry's minor hockey experience. There's a balance there. You can try to win a national championship, but everybody's got to play. Even at the NHL level, they manage the minutes better, so everybody has a role and earns a role and plays a role. So I think the reality of those girls, yes, the Olympians in particular, potential Olympians, the ice time they're getting is not going to be as much as they would get on that national Olympic team. And you've got to play 4-line, 40-second shift hockey. And that balance between how you're coached, how you play, it's something that is really important when you're thinking of the national women's program. How do you manage that team relative to how are they playing there? And are they learning to play a different role, earn a different role, and accept shorter shifts and more of a team play philosophy? So that's the intriguing thing. I just think watching that game and seeing this girl not get any ice time, I thought she was at the camp one of the best players at the Chinese camp, which had 7 professional players on it playing for that pro team that's playing in Russia now. And to not see her play, I just thought, okay, I wasn't as impressed with the team play in that game of either team. It was pretty one-on-one-ish. And
which game did you watch, Wally?
I watched Minnesota. It was an overtime win for Minnesota.
Oh yeah, the Duluth game.
Yeah, that game.
I didn't watch that one. I missed it.
But I just looked at it because she was playing. Then I watched how they were playing, and I didn't see much happen about what we're talking about, like at a higher level. So
watch Wisconsin play. You'll see all of it. I was very impressed by it, but Providence was out of their league. They were punching way above their weight. I'm sure Wisconsin will have a tougher road of it today, but the execution and the offensive movement of Wisconsin when they don't have the puck or when they're cycling down low, like their top 2 lines. And again, I think they're majority Team Canada level or Team USA level players, but it's not like what I would say I typically see of college hockey teams. So it was fun to watch, and not necessarily able to replicate it unless you have players of that level. But
what about Providence? How many national players are on their team, or carded athletes?
I don't know the Americans. I know they had. I know Bachna's there, who played. I think she played on the U18 for Canada. They don't have many. They've got the German national team goalie, who kept them in, but they're not even in the same stratosphere in terms of, you know, that ability. And I would say Providence rolled a bit more. They only had 5D on the roster. I guess they had a bunch of COVID issues, so they only had 5D to play. But like I said, Wisconsin got through their lineup. Like their fourth line definitely got minutes, and I don't know if the kid I knew was just more of a utility player in that situation. I'm not sure. But I would say both coaches were pretty even with ice time in that game, from what I saw. And then I watched, I forget what the first game I watched, but similarly, I thought, you know, they were pretty even. But today will be the telling one, because it's the semis, right? And you've got really the top 4 teams. So, you know, whether they shorten or not in those scenarios will be interesting. But I got to run, guys. I got this one's. Want to say hi, Sasha?
Hi, Sasha.
This is the
Hello.
social one. All right,
Hey,
guys.
We've got Dean Holden on speakerphone with us now, everybody. So
I can take over. Slide in.
Is Malcolm Sutherland still on, or did he depart?
no, he left
An
probably
hour ago.
30 minutes
Is it-
ago, maybe.
Does anybody have his cell phone number?
I'm not sure if I do or not.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I'm going to try to get a hold of him. For everybody's that's still on, most of you, and Bob, I'm going to ask you to submit a bio resume. Try to shorten the one up that you might have, which is 2 pages long or 3.
I'll get you
Dean
one today.
Dean Holden did one, as did Malcolm. And I looked at what we had put together with P3 and used it as a model with about 20 mentors on it. And I wrote it so that the public audience would be interested in having you mentor. And in some cases, my own bio, which started at about 4 pages, I finally got down to about 7 lines. And I think if they would read it and be interested in it. But I'm hoping everybody who I'm going to send out today what I've got so far. I've added at the end of it, it's a long thing for all of us. All the books that I've got here I've taken pictures of the covers and put them in the very last page. And in the front, I've put a picture of one of our SARC sessions of our screen with about 6 coaches on it, explaining who we are. So I'm looking forward to getting everybody's profiles. And if you need to change anything or want to update anything, just feel free to do so. So Rick, when you look at yours, it's there. Tim, yours is there. If you've got another picture you want to put in, update it, that's fine. I'll make those changes accordingly. And when I put stuff out, I'll promote the work that we're doing and promote different people at different times that might appear in the video links, just to add sharing of information. That's all.
Sorry, where was that, Wally? Where did you have them?
Where did I have what?
All the bios?
Well, it's the P3 bio form. It's a sheet that I've collated 3 or 4 years ago. And your bio is on it, condensed bio. And I'll resend it to everybody today.
Okay.
And you can look at it. You had a picture, I think it was at Torino. You had the sort of looked like a Russian hat on your head. Anyway, that was it. But I'll send that out to you. So it's just anybody who's been on in a pretty regular fashion is sort of what I'm going to build that list on. Like I've got to get more information from Sammy Joe, and I'm waiting for Dave to join again before I'm going to add him as one. But I don't know if anybody's heard what's happened with him at the U of S. He interviewed for a co-coach position there. Nobody's heard anything? Nope. Okay.
I was under the understanding that Babcock was going to hire somebody that he was going to mentor for a year and then take over from him.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. Yeah.
So I don't see that being Dave King.
Well, he interviewed.
Really?
It might be that he just wanted Dave to help him with the whole thing.
Yeah.
Could be.
Anyway, I had a question that related to the 9-0 game last night. I know, Tim, you mentioned the full moon, but
I don't think there was one, but it must have felt that way.
But I had a different thought. The coaching staff was all American League, COVID. So literally, I'm sure they didn't coach. And I'm wondering how much that not coaching, not interfering with the way they wanted to play or were going to play, had a role in it. Versus Daryl Sutter, who came in as the head coach and has put his stamp on the way he wants the team to play. So it's that old balance between here's a staff that just comes in and the players seem to be playing better than they've ever played. When I looked at the highlights, of course, they were all goals. But to have a game like that against a pretty formidable good team, and Bob, you talked about Hart and the frustration they created. Somebody in the interviews on TV last night talked about, would you keep that staff in even after these coaches recover? But
don't change the winning lineup.
Yeah, that's what Stewie was saying last night, jokingly, of course.
Yeah.
But.
Well, in high school sports, when I was the department head, I had a philosophy, and actually I lost Tom Morrissey. He was the senior basketball coach in my first year, and he was a difference maker. He was a great basketball coach. Boy, he got the floor painted with laser logos at our high school. He was like the master coach. But when I came in, over 3 or 4 years, I adopted a philosophy that we wanted to develop coaches. That any junior coach who was coaching a junior team, if he got educated and certified and wanted to become a better coach, he would get an opportunity to coach senior. And I think it was in my 4th year as a department head, I had a junior basketball coach who was a counselor approach me about, would he ever have a chance to coach the senior team? And I said, if you take your level 3 theory, he had level 1 and 2, I'll guarantee you'll get a chance. And he did. I gave him the chance, and Tom left the school. And my idea was, it's not about me and my program. Just like I coach senior football or coach junior, I coach senior, and then I went back to junior after we got people in that wanted to coach senior. That was just my philosophy, my stamp. Now that coach, when he took over, he wasn't a basketball guy. He was just a good coach, educated, self-trained. The only provincial 4 AAA championship ever won by that high school was won by him that year. And I had the star players come and see me and wonder about what I was doing. And when I explained to them the philosophy of the decision, give them some confidence and assurance about the coach that was coming in, it would be different. And after the championship, the top player who went on to the UFC came and saw me and said, you made the right call, the outcome itself is really the ultimate measurement of it. And that's sort of what my experience was there at a high school level. So, Dean, have you ever been involved in coaching selection, coaching naming at different levels, and who's going to do what job in your work?
Yeah, I was on the board in minor hockey for 4 years, and so I was in charge of coach, I guess they call it coach selection. And a lot of that was just filtering through who was, once you know which kids are going to be on which team, you look at who applied and sort through all that. And you look at the, their previous experience, their coaching certifications, all that. Like they all had to put applications in, and we created a spreadsheet, and we pre-sorted everything so that before, like, we got 5 evaluation skates. So on our 4th evaluation, by the 4th evaluation, we started to go through them, and after the 4th, we really started to slot them into groupings of where we thought potential, parent, volunteer, assistant coaches would be. We never had anybody apply from external, from outside the community to coach, except for like 2 or 3 occasions. But we utilized them as well. Like we slotted them in where we saw fit. So that was kind of at the minor hockey level. Working overseas in various places. I don't think I ever really had to select a coach because I was always inheriting coaches. I was always inheriting those roles. But what I ended up doing was I helped to crystallize what the roles were. And it goes back to what you were talking about last week, Wally. Like in Romania, they didn't have a vision or a mission. And within 3 days of getting there, they asked me to sit in on a, let's call it nicely, a discussion with all the U12 and U10 coaches and some of the U14 coaches, because the U14 coaches were accusing the U12 coaches of not developing the players enough so that when they graduated to the U14 level, they weren't prepared. And then the U12 coaches were then passing the buck down the line to the U10 coaches and so on and so on. And so I sat in this meeting, and it went on for 3 or 4 hours, and of course it's in Hungarian, and my Hungarian was 0, so I had to have a little bit of a translation here and there. But you just tell by the body language and the tone that was pretty heated, and there was a lot of accusations, finger pointing, chest thumping, and afterwards, the president and the second in command pulled me aside and said, "Dean, what do you think? We need to maybe deselect some coaches or select some coaches. Like they're not getting the job done. Like they're not evaluating very well because their players aren't playing very well." I could go down this rabbit hole and answer it in a lot of ways, but all I told them was, guys, I can't tell you what's good or bad. I need to know more about the organization and the academy. What's your philosophy? What's your vision? What's your mission? What are your values? Like, are you saying that we need to win at U14 and at U12 and U10? Do these coaches know that? Like, why does this academy exist? I need to hear some background information to put things into context. I can't just, sit in on a meeting and then, nod and agree with you. So, I think it was very good because for these guys, they've already been running their academy for 3 years, but they didn't have this cornerstone foundational piece. Like they didn't know what was guiding them. And when I started to dig into it a little bit, and I took a month to dig into this because they asked me to, and it essentially came back to politics. The Hungarian government in Romania wanted to make a big splash, and they donated a bunch of money. They built a bunch of rinks, and they created this academy to buy votes because the Romanian people at birth automatically were granted a Hungarian passport as well if they were of Hungarian descent. Therefore, they could vote. So they put wonderful idea, but they, from the sounds of it, it was strictly a political thing to garner votes, and they hadn't really put any thought into the vision, the mission, and certainly not in the HR portion of that. Like, how do you staff something if you don't know what direction you're going? So that was kind of my most recent brush with coach selection evaluation, and it was from an inheritance point of view. And so I got them to backtrack and basically, like I said, figure something out from a leadership point of view, and then let's start to put that out to the coaches and educate them. And now you can see, do the coaches even want to be part of it? This is what the mission and the values are going to be. And then we can start to go down this road. But until then, all this bluster and this 3-4 hour discussion was a waste of time.
Now, when you were selecting coaches in minor hockey in Canada, what was your role with that organization?
The official role, the 4 years I was on the board, was first vice president. So the role, each position had it had a clearly identified list of bullets that said what our roles were supposed to be within the organization. And those are on the website, and those were presented to us before we, put our name forward to get voted in. And so one of the things that fell under my area was coach selection and coach evaluation. So it was essentially player coach development. So it's kind of like a volunteer technical director, I suppose. And so those things, and discipline was under there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, but to your question, those areas were under that first VP role.
Did you have a mission statement in your organization that provided the sense of what you were doing, perspective that would provide a solid foundation of support for what you were doing?
No, again, when I went in there, that was the first thing I said. Start with the mission statement, like, what do you guys stand for? What do you want the association to be known for? And so from the outset, that's where we started. We started to build that right away. Again, it's a volunteer board, so it took quite some time for them to get it done. Going back in memory, I would think it took almost a year. But I said, look, like, you got to have this clearly defined, and we need to get it up on the website. We need to make sure it's transparent. We need to, all the stakeholders need to know, the parents, the kids, everybody. I was
Super.
also, at the same time, for the same number of years, Concord Minor Soccer Wally was the same. Nothing. They never had a mission statement. Like, it was, I couldn't believe it.
Well,
Wally, besides football, like junior and senior, did you coach other sports when you were teaching in high school?
myself?
Yeah.
Yes, football, wrestling, and track. My favorite sport to coach was wrestling. To this day, it's still wrestling. One-on-one, no distractions, and the competition itself is just man against man, woman against woman. And dealing with them, it just took out all the baggage in a one-on-one setting that you didn't have to deal with in team sports. Now, in high school, there was no baggage for me because I coached in the way that I felt was the right way ethically, and it got results that kept me, that I could be proud of. But more important than that, the ethical side of it is where I found, developed that kind of philosophical roots. But football, wrestling, and track, I learned to coaching other sports. But at the same time, I made a point of really pursuing the education pieces. Doing the hockey was one thing, but the most important part of my education, by far more useful, was Theory 1, 2, and 3, and the modules that I completed in Theory 4. And I have to say that the Theory 4 modules, I only got to complete them because Dave King would send me to the courses on the weekends they were on in Toronto because he was coaching. He didn't have time to go. So I would take a module or two modules on a weekend, come back, and the mental training module for coaches and the mental training module for players, I put into my school curriculum in a sports psych 10, 20, and 30 format and played with it all the time with my phys ed classes and applied it with my students. So coaching football, wrestling, and track, individual sports, boys and girls, I really had a laboratory to experiment with. And Tim, when I was with the national team, I had a vision about every national player goes to a school, a high school. High school teachers are physically educated, kinesiology, biomechanics, and all the resources we acquired by coaching the national team, they needed to be in their hands. So those modules I played with, learned from, and applied as a coach with the national team. And then what I learned from the experts there, it's just a wealth of information. The high school sports setting, grade 10 to 12, they can make a bigger difference with the kids that get into Phys Ed 30. They're going to be your athletes that are going to be elite. Not all of them, but many of them will go on. And that was one of my visions, was being on the national team, having taught school, and trying to share that with the high school phys ed departments, going through the whether it's the Catholic school system or the public system, going through the sports leaders. That was sort of a wishful thinking module to do that I was able to live with and experiment with for 20, well, not, it would have been about 15 years when I was working with Dave in the 80s. Yeah. So that sort of explains a little bit of the background of where I came from on coaching.
And how many years coaching all those sports like football, track, wrestling? How many years did you coach them all every year? There's all three sports, or
I coached football, wrestling, and track. I would say there was a 7-year period where I did all three with hockey. And I'm sort of saying over 15 years, I had a 3-sport coaching experience. And I believe I might have even had 20 years of coaching experience. It started out with one sport only, and gradually I took on more sports. And
nice.
I think Wally.
Yeah.
Like I remember when the U.S. won the gold over Russia, we were both coaching wrestling in a wrestling tournament, and the game was on at one of the high schools. I can't remember which one, but I went in the staff room and I watched the hockey game. You were out there coaching your wrestlers, so I knew nothing about wrestling. I just kind of volunteered to do the wrestling so the wrestlers could wrestle. And but anyways, in high school, I high school 2 years I did football, wrestling, and track. But in junior high, I was 22 years in junior high. I coached every imaginable sport, volleyball, basketball, badminton, gymnastics. So it's quite the experience, you know. It really teaches you. Every sport has its, like wrestling is incredible, the training they do and stuff. Every sport has its kind of thing that transfers. So when you're a hockey coach, you can draw from all of those things. So that was a good experience.
I think I was in a bar in Minneapolis when 1980 game.
I thought you were going to say you're in the bar like most of the years.
I was playing with the Rangers then. Yeah, I think it was post game or something. Anyway,
Well, I was kind of looking in to see. I'm expecting the Americans to get beat because they got beat like 10-1 2 days before or something, I think, by the Russians. And I didn't expect them to get beat. And then they keep hanging in there and playing pretty good. So I jump back and forth all the time just to see it. And then when it was right to the crux, I just stayed in the staff room till it was over.
I think
I was young enough to be a participant in that tournament that you guys were coaching in. The wrestling tournament.
What was that, Tim?
No, I said I think I was young enough to be a participant in that wrestling tournament that you two guys were coaching in.
You probably were.
High school?
I went to Wisewood, but no, I'm not quite that young. No, I finished high school in 70.
Did you wrestle?
Oh yeah, I wrestled right through high school and after high school. I actually wrestled when I was in high school. I wrestled for the Mount Royal Tech State Combine team because they didn't have enough guys to make a team. So
did you wrestle pro?
Yeah, I did.
What was your name?
Little Brutus. But I wrestled when I was in grade 11 and 12. I wrestled for Mount Royal State Combine team because they didn't have enough members, and I was pretty good.
Was that Mr. Weed or something? Or who was the coach?
Rummy Saridiak.
Yeah. I just remember that Mount Royal when you look down onto the wrestling mat from the foyer.
Yeah, that's right.
That circular thing.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting. Henry Wisewood. I don't know if you know Stan Schwartz at all.
Yeah. He was my football coach when I was there. One of them. See, I am younger than you.
He was coaching wrestling, and I told the story before. Recently, I had a wrestler. He was a junior high age, grade 8, grade 9, gonna join next year. But he was better than anybody at my school, wrestling in grade 12 in quite a few weight classes. And he wrestled with me, and I've phoned Stan because we had a tri-meet at Wisewood, and I said, Stan, I've got this kid in grade 9. He's 127 weight class. He's really good. Like, he can beat most of my best wrestlers. We didn't have any real provincial wrestlers, champions yet. But he said, well, the weight class that he's going to wrestle is I've got a provincial champion. I said, well, that'll be good for him. He should get his butt kicked, but we'll see. And anyway, we went to the meet, and this kid beat him. It was amazing. Stan just looked at me. Now, he went on to 2 Olympics. So when I was reading Angie Abdu's book, her brother wrestled in 2 Olympics, and her father wrestled in 2 Olympics. And I wanted to talk to Angie, and I couldn't get her phone number. So I phoned Peter Gutterson, who was the kid that was the wrestler. I said, do you know her brother's name? He says, yeah, he's coaching wrestling at Simon Fraser. He gave me the phone number. I phoned, talked to him, got Angie's number, and I've been on the phone with Angie probably 5 or 6 times. She's done the mission statement exercise with me. She's written a book about minor hockey pitfalls that she's lived. And now she's coaching swimming, but she's a prof as well. Very articulate and provides an excellent ethical background to what's going on in the real world of minor sports. So pretty interesting stories.
Yeah.
Anybody else coached any other sports? Dean, you must have coached your kids in other sports.
Yeah, soccer, basketball, gymnastics, biking. Those were the main ones. Like, they dabbled in a few other things too. And Callie's still in dance. Devin's still in gymnastics through COVID, soccer. Aside from hockey, but yeah, going back to what you said, I mean, I think that was really helpful for me. My coaching abilities was not only, having to take coach education classes outside of hockey, but then, you get to meet a new network of coaches in those classes. And, also the experience I had at the National Coaching Institute at U of C for a year. I was the only hockey coach and everybody else. And we had short and long track speed skating, volleyball, you name it. We had every sport there. I think there was about 18 of us. And then my master's degree at UVic, we had a cohort of about 20, 22, and then we had even more coaches and teachers represented who were working in different sports again. And again, just now going through the PhD stuff, I mean, now, I'm dealing with, people in field hockey. It's something that's not really a big sport over here. It's interesting because there's a lot of similarities. And I had some great experiences in Cardiff, working with the men's first division team and the rugby team there, and basketball, netball, hurling. I looked at Aussie rules football, cricket, a whole bunch of stuff. And I can't even begin to tell you the rules or the names of the positions on some of these things, but just learning, you can kind of group these games into families, and so hockey is considered an invasion sport. So I have a preference to look at those kind of sports because then you can, the principles of play, they can overlap, and you can learn. So I think it's really helped just to get new perspectives.
Yeah, good stuff, Dean. When you were talking about the networking, first time in my level 3 course, theory, that's a long one, taken through Mount Royal College. What you had to do with that course, it must have been 4 months, 2 days a week, 3 hours an evening. And that's the course that I had to get my counselor who wanted to coach the senior basketball team to take, to justify him taking the senior basketball team. But anyway, multi-sport. And Dean, I have to tell you, the biggest thing I got out of it was from an equestrian coach. And she was talking about, we were in the mental training. And
Sounds like it might be a horse shit.
Yeah. She talked about the mental age and the mindset of a horse. About a great, a 4-year-old mental state, and about the emotional of a horse and the connection with the communication of the horse. And it was like, wow, eye-opening for me. And I learned to appreciate the knowledge of the other coaches relative to their sports being far beyond what I could imagine as a hockey player or a hockey coach. So, Dean, I don't know where you're at, but Malcolm Sutherland, in his bio, he's only one of a few coaches that's an honorary member of the Coaches Association of Canada, and that's multi-sport. He might be one of 3 coaches that sit in that capacity, in that committee. So similar to yourself, you could be in that capacity, having been around the world. But when I talked to Malcolm and I talked to you yesterday about your experience is beyond imagination, and being able to make it applicable, marketable, useful to the general public, and appreciative of the making the sport better ethically and technically, it's going to be huge moving forward. So anyway, it's all good stuff. And I don't know, Tim, you coach any other sports? I know you played a few.
Yeah, no, I coach myself in tennis, and that's maybe about it. Yeah, played lots: soccer, tennis, basketball. It's one of the multi-sport guys growing up. Played volleyball a year or two in high school.
Yeah. What about you, Bobby?
I coach lacrosse and a little bit of wrestling.
Now, one of the questions, Dean, I asked at coaching clinics, and you've probably been through it before. It's an exercise in awareness, and coaches writing down the name of their favorite coach and why, and having a discussion about it. So at the top of your heads, Dean, who's your favorite coach? All sports, your whole lifetime, and everybody else, think about that. I've got a real strange one, but a different one. Dean, can you think of it?
I think the first one that always jumps to mind was my dad, because parent would always have to volunteer to coach you in whatever, and so my dad always stepped up because he came from a multi-sport background too, and he played hockey, he played rugby, he played baseball. There's so many things that he did, and so he was always, he was either volunteering or voluntold that he was going to coach, and so it didn't matter the sport, and then he took me out dirt biking and mountain biking and hiking, and I mean there's a lot of other you can also call them activities, like lifestyle activities. And so right through until, Bantam, he was always my coach for whatever sport I played. The only time, he didn't coach me in soccer. That was the only sport he didn't. So we had a bunch of Dutch guys, and so they always really wanted to get in there and coach, because I grew up in North Haven. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the reason I choose him, Wally, is he didn't know a lot of details, like technical and tactical, but he treated everybody fairly, and he was very ethical, and he was harder on me. He always told me, look, I'll coach you, but you don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card. In fact, it's going to be twice as hard for you. Like, I'm going to have to be harder on you in order to make sure other people aren't going to accuse me of favoritism. And that's how it was. But he was always fair, firm but fair, and just I think that is growing up as a kid had a real big impact on me. And even though his knowledge of all these sports was general and it wasn't specific, because I know in contrast to that, once I left him being a coach in hockey, showing a psychoanalyst of all the crazies that I was subjected to after that, and and they all came with a more distinguished pedigree than my dad, as far as did they play pro or did they coach at a high level and have certification. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of flawed individuals there, and the ethics and morality went out the window on almost all of them. And really, that's why I ended up leaving sport. It was like black and white. I couldn't believe it. So many people who didn't have those values, and there's no consistency. And if there was consistency, it was consistently bad and negative. And it was very much, you guys know, I mean, I'm I'm going to speculate. I'm a little younger than you guys, but when I grew up, you know, I was in that Graham James era, and I had a lot of friends that went through that, and yeah, it was pretty tough.
Okay, Bob Laux, favorite coach.
Dale Anderson, Henry Oiswood football. We had him. We had Schwartz. Had Ted Rhodes there. We had some very good football coaches there. Nev Anderson. We have good guys, but Dale Anderson just treated everybody so well. He always listened to everybody. Everybody's concerns. Everybody got to play at some position on the team. Obviously in football, you play more than others. I played both ways, so I never came off the field, so I kind of enjoyed that. But he was just an all-around great guy that knew how to relate to the kids.
Super. Tim Bothwell.
Well, I think we've been down this road before. It's kind of hard for me in lots of ways. I feel very fortunate. I've had a lot of good coaches. Like going right back to the first couple of years I played. Like I can think of all the coaches from when I first started when I was like 7, 8 years old. Really, all the way through university. All of my coaches, to use Bob's word, they treated me and the other players in the team. They treated us well, respectfully, and we're sort of in it, I think, for the development of us as players versus, hey, we got to win, and the one exception to that, from the time I started through university was. And God rest his soul. In lots of ways, he was a good man. But Bert Templeton, who was one of the winningest coaches ever in major junior hockey, he was he was competitive. Let's start with a positive: competitive, intense, passionate coach. But he was nasty, angry, zero patience, and it was not fun playing for Bert Templeton. And so it's kind of old school coaching, but he's the one that really sticks out in all the coaches I had that was sort of on the flip side of that, really old school coaching. I grew to like him over time, like when I got to know him in later years, and we had some good conversations, but he was not a fun coach to play for, and it was not enjoyable. And I'm so thankful I didn't sort of run into him earlier when I may have switched sports or something like that. But so I benefited from a lot of coaches that treated me well and respectfully, and right through university. And I loved Herb Brooks. Same thing, treated us well, was respectful of both our knowledge and our abilities. But he was very innovative, and lots of variety at practice. He was terrific to play for, and then Barclay Plager, because he really walked that line between being tough but being fair and respectful. Like he knew when you were struggling, he needed to be your friend and to get you back to where you were. But when things were going well, that's when he could slap you upside the head and try to push you to be a little bit better. So that's a long, complicated answer, which I think I've given before. But
I got a question, Tim. Where did you play for Templeton?
I was Bantam. My second, it was really the first AAA sort of level team I played on in Bantam.
Wow.
In Burlington, Ontario.
Yeah.
And we had a couple other pretty good hockey players on that team. Ron Saddlebar was on the team, long-time first-round draft pick and long-time NHLer. Paul Crowley, who played major junior in Sudbury, Ontario. We had some pretty good players, a good team. But, yeah, he was tough to play for.
Okay. What you chose to go to university, Ivy League school. So what was your route moving up the ladder, competitive ladder to get there? Did you play major, junior, or?
No, I was a tall, skinny kid in high school, and I got maybe one letter from Oshawa inviting me to their training camp, but I was kind of focused. I didn't really know if I was going to be a player at that point of any accomplishment. So I chose not to go. I was kind of focused on maybe going to university. And then actually when Bert, he was coaching in Hamilton with the major junior team there, they had a little defenseman shortage his 1 year. And I was playing what would be now sort of tier 2 junior in Burlington. It was junior B team, but I think there were only 10 tier 2 junior teams in all of Canada at that time. But anyway, Bert tried to halfway through the year to get me to go to play in Hamilton, and I said, no, Bert, I'm just gonna probably go and play at university. I don't want to ruin my eligibility and everything. And he didn't take that very well. He was kind of nasty. So anyway, I played play in Burlington. Then played for our junior team in Burlington. It was junior B team, and then went to Brown. And didn't I know the rest of the story. I didn't get drafted, but there's a whole story there. But people don't want to hear the gory details of my long hockey history. So,
Well, I'm curious because how the hell did you get to play through the NHL door? Because that was in a very competitive era. How they weren't privy to college graduates at that time, were they?
No, we're just starting to come in. It's late 70s, so there's some good college players starting to, make an impact in the NHL. So it was coming on stream, not the way it is now, but so the Rangers offered me I was a free agent. Rangers offered me a contract when I was finished at Brown, and I always like to tell the story that it was one of the last things that John Ferguson did with the Rangers. He got fired about 3 weeks later, and I always wonder, was it directly related? Because he signed me for a contract.
Well, listen, guys, it's really been good. I'm on my 6th page of notes. This was a hell of a session.
Been a good one. I got to run too, Wally, but it's been a good one.
So,
well, I'm just got to take this call and sign off here before I close with you. Hold the line.
Yeah, good to have you on again, Bob and Dean. Stuck your noses in.
try to get on next week.
See you guys.
All right. Take care.
Good to see you. I guess the morning hockey's done at Wildwood, Tom?
Yeah, just about 2 weeks of it.
Yeah.
The ice sure went quick.
Yeah.
But we were also playing at Glendale, and like the days Wildwood wasn't good and all this. And so all of a sudden there's no preschool sessions at Glendale and all this, and I thought they were renovating the whole place, like maybe building on. And I just read yesterday a sewage line burst and flooded their entire community hall with about a foot of sewage. And
I heard about that.
They got to rip the walls off. So that's why they're all there.
Yeah.
The city was all over there yesterday. I guess maybe fixing the lines up, but
yeah,
that would be pretty nasty to walk in that morning.
Well, that's kind of a shitty place to end, but maybe we'll have to end there. Wally, your mic's off. We're trying to say goodbye, but your mic's off.
I'm sorry, but Tom, could you tell me your favorite coach story so I can include that? That I'm going to edit this section out for a purpose of an exercise to do at coaching clinics, because 90% of the time, 95% of the coaches, their favorite coach was that guy, that kind of ethical, treat you well, respect you. There are some that like the goalie, ones that pushed them and they got results and that from it. But we're trying to sell the ethical piece of doing things the right way. So take care, Tim. Thanks very much.
Good, Dean.
Hey, you want to hear mine?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna record yours, Tom, for sure.
Mine is Bob. I'll be short.
I'll hang in until Tom's finished here.
Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
Bob Peters. Mine was Bob Peters in Bemidji. I went there like I was a walk-on because I'd been in the seminary studying to be a priest, and I played a half a year of Alberta Junior, and I just saw this guy come back. He was like 25 times better than last time. I said, "Where are you been?" And he said, "Bemidji." I'd never heard of it, and so I wrote a letter to the coach saying who I was, and I had pretty good stats. And he said, "Well, I've never seen you play, but sounds like you have a chance. If you want to walk on, I'll give you a fair shot." And I went there and I made it. And I couldn't play till the second half of the year because I went to Mount Royal one semester. So anyways, the first game I played, I think we were playing Manitoba. We played a lot of Canadian teams. The first 34 games I played there, we won. And no overtime, we won them all. Our last two was 4-1 and 6-1 against UFC. And but before we could step on the ice, we didn't get in the ice about October. We had to run 10 miles around the lake. And the guy had set a scoring record the year before, this guy named Austin Wallstead. And around the lake, a couple of his buddies drove him about 2 miles. And the coach found out. I never saw the guy play. He never stepped on the ice. And that was the deal, is that you went there and it was just absolutely, everybody knew that it's kind of like Sutter. You go and you work as hard as you can all the time. And I remember we finally lost really two of our D and our top scorer were in Europe with the US team. And we got clobbered by Lake Superior State. We beat them about 8 times in a row. They beat us 11-0 or 11-1 or something. And we went back to Bemidji, and he never said one word about it. We just had 2 skates every practice because we all knew what our identity was. And we went back and we played there in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, in the national championships the next weekend. And we beat them 6-2 or 7-2 or something like that. But it was just, he was kind of like Harry Neal, a one-liner guy. He was really funny. His pregame talks, everybody knew what they're supposed to do and how hard, and our identity was absolutely clear. And I really liked him. And the worst coach was, well, not worst coach, but a guy, I was playing Little League Baseball, and we probably had the best team in the city. And this guy kind of thought it was because of him. So we're in the playoffs, and the referee lost count of the count a few times, his little clicker. And the coach got so mad, he took us off the field, and we withdrew, and we were eliminated because the score. And we don't care. We just want to play. But it was a big ego thing with him. So that's totally other end of the spectrum.
Tom,
And I
thanks very
remember
much.
I